If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this. What's the most unsettling and spooky paranormal demon encounter you've had in the middle of the night or at 3 a.m.? I collect clowns. Anything to do with them. It honestly started as a joke, but I can't stop. Anyway, I have this clown head that, if you turn it, plays a tune. So there I was, playing some games with a friend at 3 a.m. on a summer night. The clown head was across the room, and it started dinging. One note at a time. I hadn't gone to that side of the room at all. As it dings, it slowly spins its head. This honestly happens a lot, so I wasn't too fazed. After a while I noticed it hadn't dinged in a while, so I turned to look at it, and it was staring straight at me. It was originally facing parallel to where I was facing and was straight to my right, so it turned 90 degrees. After that I took it off its stand so it couldn't spin or ding. It still occasionally does, though. When I was 9 or 10, I had a friend over, and we stayed at my grandma's because my parents were busy. We chilled out and played video games for most of the day, but when it got late, we decided to go to sleep. When I was younger, I always left the door open because I was afraid that something might occur, and if I screamed, my parents would not hear me. We both fell asleep in my bed. I was about 2 or 3 feet away from him in bed. I woke up in the middle of the night and heard something outside my door. I decided to sit up and look out my door. What I saw still gives me chills to this day. I saw what looked like a demonic version of my grandmother on her hands and knees outside my door. It noticed me and looked me in the eyes, and its eyes looked demonic. It had long hair down to its chest. I immediately lay back down and tried to wake my friend up, but he wouldn't wake up. I sat up, and it was gone. I didn't look around the room to see if it came in, I just lay back down and closed my eyes and prayed. It was gone until I fell asleep. The next morning I told my grandmother what I saw, and she said it may have been her because she dropped her glasses. The only reason I don't believe that is because she had short hair, down to her neck, and it had hair on its chest and different eyes, and it wasn't wearing the same clothes as her, and the time she said she dropped her glasses just didn't seem like the same time I woke up. I still get chills when I think back to that day. This incident makes me believe we all have a demonic version of ourselves, a demon that looks just like us. Has anyone else had any similar experiences? The experience wasn't particularly unsettling, but it was definitely strange. When I was about 8 or 9, I'm 20 now, I woke up at exactly 3 a.m. There was nothing in my room. It was pitch black. Suddenly there was a light in the middle of my room. A woman who I didn't know was standing clear as day in the middle of my room. She was dressed in a white dress, but not quite a wedding gown. I didn't feel scared at all. I remember feeling calm and safe. I asked her who she was, and she just smiled and then was gone. I never thought anything of it until about a year later when I was looking through some of my dad's old photo albums. There was a lady in a lot of the photos who looked familiar, but I couldn't quite put a finger on it. I asked my dad who she was. She was my grandmother, who died when my dad was 16. To this day I believe I have a guardian angel. I have a story from my childhood. Hide and seek at night. It was a normal summer night for us. We were playing hide and seek at night with my friends. It was around 10 p.m. at night and pretty dark. I and my friends were hiders. We hid behind small trees next to each other, on the side of their garden. When the game started we heard a strange sound like somebody was moving with the grill. They had cats, so we thought the cats were doing it, but the cats were on the porch. We could see the area, so we decided to peek closer. And we saw it. We could see the face of a tall figure. It was pitch black and appeared to be staring at us. It started moving with its arms and started moving with the grill. We started freaking out. Both of us saw the same thing and decided to run off. His brother, the same age as me, and our other friends started asking us what happened. We explained it to them. His father told us, it was only a shadow playing with us. But we saw it exactly the same, at the same time. How was it moving the grill? No, we don't think it was just a shadow, it was something else. I see floating shadow people in the graveyard every night. Do you see what I see? That's what I always asked of people around that place, especially the keeper who manages the graveyard. Some were scared, and some were calling me strange/a weirdo, but luckily enough some had agreed, the keeper. I always go there at nighttime so that I can talk to some of the shadows, especially my grandpa and grandma, as I bring them a bouquet of flowers and peace offerings. This one time, recently, a month ago, I was searching for the keeper to give him some food that I had bought for myself until I heard a little girl crying. She was behind an old gravestone that appeared to be rotting. She was hiding with her small, eerily white feet sticking out. I gently spoke to her, asking why she's crying. She didn't answer at first. After about 5 minutes, She told me no one had visited her for a year now, and she missed her family. I offered her some reassurance that someone might finally visit her tomorrow or in the following days. Life may have become difficult for her family too, but nonetheless, I had comforted her. So, before I left, I had given her my food instead of eating it. I told her it's hers now. I'll give her some flowers too from time to time as I visit my relatives. The crying as well as the shadow behind the gravestone had gone away. I was confused until I felt a sudden warmth around my body. It was brief, yet it gave me a little relief that she wouldn't be in distress. And from that day on, I had prayed for her, and guess what? Her family members finally came. They don't know me, but I'm truly happy they had visited. And life goes on for me. Don't go out past midnight. I had just left my boyfriend's, now husband, house after staying there all night. It was a typical afternoon of studying and video games. I felt a little bit groggy getting out to my car because I had passed out and taken a nap for about an hour. It was extremely cold, and I remember that feeling waking me up once I had gotten into my car. I pulled out of his driveway and made my way down the back road that eventually led to a main intersection. It was completely quiet and still with absolutely no one else on the road. I was kind of used to this because I worked graves at a nursing home, full-time, and by myself. I remember glancing down at the clock to see it read 2:30 a.m. As I reach the intersection and flip my signal on to turn left, the light remains red, and I sit there for about a minute waiting for it to change. Across the road there is a massive cemetery that sits atop a hill. I blankly stared at it, wondering if any residents that I've worked with rest there. Eventually the light turns green, and I make my way down the long stretch of road. The speed limit is now 50 miles per hour all the way down this hill, and the cemetery covers half of that distance. I was shivering because my car's heater hardly worked, and my teeth chatter uncontrollably when I'm freezing. I was zoned the hell out until I reached the bottom of the hill. The road is illuminated with lights, so I was pretty darn sure I didn't see anything ahead while making my way down this hill. As I pull up to the light at the bottom, I see something materialize out of thin air. It was a woman. She was standing behind a white van that was down a ditch on the side of the road with its red lights on. I remember tapping my brakes and feeling as if time slowed down. My heart was pumping adrenaline throughout my body so fast my fingers burned, and it went all the way up into my chest. She was screaming, with wide-open tear-filled eyes. She was mouthing something to me, but it didn't register. I realized she was pointing in the direction of the cemetery. I was so confused because it honestly looked to me as if she was screaming her heart out, but I couldn't hear a thing. A short Hispanic woman with her hair back in a ponytail, blue jeans, and no shoes. I reached the stoplight, and I instantly swung back around to catch a second look. There was absolutely nothing. I remember my hands not being able to steady themselves as I reached for the steering wheel. I could hardly catch my breath. The feeling I got when I looked into her eyes was complete panic and terror. The rest of the ride home was quiet. I couldn't sleep that night, and I can still see her face clear as day. Just makes me wonder why she wanted to show herself to me and if there was something I could have done to help. Boy, do I have a story for you. I live in Illinois in the Knox County area. We have a place in our area called Wolf Covered Bridge. Although it is extremely haunted, we were curious to learn more about it. We have had countless other bizarre experiences there, including objects being thrown at us and witnessing something running towards us before it disappeared at the foot of the bridge. However, none of those experiences compare to the next story I am about to share. I believe it was around 3 a.m., but honestly I don't remember. We were going back to the bridge because my brother had gotten 2 attachments from spirits there because he pissed them off and they wanted revenge. We had a medium with us so we could easily communicate with them. It started out fine and then got extremely aggressive. To the point that, we could all hear this as well, they told my brother to never come back to that bridge under any circumstances. What sent us all running back to the car was that we saw something hanging from the top of the bridge. We know it wasn't there prior, so don't say it was just our imagination. We all saw it. Someone in the car saw exactly what it was but was so terrified they haven't told anyone what they saw except one person. Ever since then none of us have gone back, and none of us plan to. Do not whistle at night. Last night, around 3:30 in the morning, I got this strange urge to whistle, 3 to 4 times in a row, loud and clear. The street outside was dead quiet. Right after the last whistle, I saw something move. It wasn't a person or an animal, it ran too fast, way faster than anything human. The way it moved felt wrong, like it didn't obey the laws of how things should move. What really froze me was how dark it was. The figure was so black that even the night looked bright around it. Then it was gone, just like that. I stood there in shock for a while before I came back inside and locked everything. It didn't even feel like fear at first, just disbelief. I know what I saw, and it wasn't normal. Since childhood, I have sensed a presence's hand when I sleep alone. Now that I have seen it, I will never sleep again. Since I was a child, every time I tuck myself in, I feel as if something touches me like a hand. I ignore it, believing it is either just animal hair or that my paranoia has worsened recently to the point of causing insomnia. 2 weeks ago, I tucked myself in, eager for it to end, but I didn't feel the hand. Relieved, I went to bed. When I felt someone hug me, I turned around and found no one. That night I didn't sleep. I continued like this every night. I feel a hand, I check, but there is nothing. Until yesterday, while I was tucking myself in, I felt the hand a little earlier than normal. I looked quickly and saw a black hand slide down my leg until it disappeared. I couldn't sleep either. I don't know what to do. If anyone has a suggestion, I would like to hear it. The mimic outside my window. I've been a lurker here for a long time, but I never imagined I'd be sharing until what happened last night. About 2 weeks ago, we moved back into the house I grew up in. I already knew the property was likely haunted. My mom and I experienced activity here my entire childhood. When my parents set up a double wide on the property years ago, the activity followed, and she dealt with it almost daily. The first week after we moved in, the front door opened by itself in broad daylight. There was no draft, and the latch was secure. The second week, the kitchen floor creaked once in a very specific spot, a spot that only makes noise when it's stepped on. And then last night, the mimic appeared. I told my daughter to get dressed so I could take the kids over to my parents' house. When I looked out the window, I saw a long-haired woman about my mom's build wearing a baggy t-shirt, walking toward our front door. But when it realized I saw it, it darted to the right and out of sight, just as I said, "Oh, Nana came to get you." I opened the door and called out, "Mumsy, I know you're out here, where'd you go?" She answered from her porch, in the opposite direction of where I'd just seen her. My stomach dropped. I asked if she'd been outside my window a moment ago, and she said, "No, I haven't moved from my porch." That's when it hit me, whatever I saw wasn't her. This isn't the first time this trickster has shown itself, either. When my mom first moved into the new house with my dad and brother, she once walked into my brother's room and saw him at his computer. She told him whatever she needed to say and went back to the living room, only for him to walk through the door a few minutes later. Over the years, she's heard my dad call for her from other rooms, only to realize she was home alone. Even my brother's wife has experienced it. They stayed in this house for a week once, and she said she heard him calling for her several times. It shook her so badly that when they came back last year, she refused to stay overnight. I told my husband I can handle noises in the house. I can even handle seeing shadows or random apparitions. But seeing my mom, one of my best friends, outside my window when it wasn't her? That's where I draw the line. Why would it take her shape and dart away when I saw it if it didn't actually want to be seen? I've experienced a lot of paranormal things, but none of them scared me quite like this one. If you hear a knock but don't see anyone outside, don't open the door. I moved into an apartment years ago, and it had a wraparound porch that had 2 doors with access to it. There was a gate to get onto my porch, so you would have to come through it to get to my front door. I had been there for about a week, and I was in the kitchen. The kitchen has a window to the porch, where you can see who is at the front gate, and it is close to the front door. I heard someone knock on the front door, so I walked there and opened it. No one was there. I walked around to the other door. No one. I checked the gate. No one was walking down the stairs, away from my upstairs apartment. I thought nothing of it and shrugged it off. That was just the beginning of my 3-year experience in that apartment. The activities in that apartment make me want to write a book about my experiences. I learned later that if you hear a knock at the door and you either don't expect anyone or can't see anyone through the peephole, then keep the door closed. Opening the door invites the entity/entities in, and that's just what I did. Demon or goblin-like creatures at night. So when I was like 8 to 10, 23 now, I was sleeping on a sectional. My brother took the long side, and I slept on the short one. I woke up in the middle of the night hearing something rubbing up against the fabric. I thought maybe it was my dad, so I looked up, and there was nothing. I waited there for, 20 to 30 seconds, and there was a damn creature creeping up on the arm of the sectional. It was maybe 4 feet tall, and it looked weird as hell. Its skin was tight, like you could see its bones and joints through it, and it almost had the face of a Frenchy-type demon. It went in between me and my brother and flinched its head at both of us and was breathing dog-like. I was there just trying to silently move my brother's leg so that he'd wake up, but nothing. At one point I thought I was sleeping, so I decided to pinch myself, and sure enough, I felt it. It was by far one of the creepiest experiences I have ever had. I even tried to tell my uncle and aunt about it, since they had come from Minnesota, but they dismissed my experience as if I must have been sleeping, even though I knew I was awake. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? If you have, please leave a comment. So I'm taking my dog out for a walk at 3 a.m. when I see a young kid riding his bike. I live out in the country in the American Midwest on the edge of a forest. Kind of middle of nowhere farmland, but there are still other houses around, although they are really spread out. Outskirts, I guess you could say. Very dark and quiet at night. A few streetlights but mostly just moonlight. I normally take my dog outside late at night before I go to bed. Nothing fancy, just a quick walk up and down the road so she can pee before we settle in for the night. Well, tonight around 3 a.m., I'm walking my dog along the edge of the road outside of my house, and I see something coming towards me along the side of the road. It's hard to make out at first, because, like I said, there are very few streetlights out here. As it gets closer though, I can tell it's a kid riding his bike. He looks like he's 7 or 8 years old. I'm standing there a little bit confused about what a child of this age would be doing riding his bike down the road at this hour of the night. When he gets closer, he stops his bike dead in its tracks and just stares at me. After a few seconds, I speak up. Are you okay? I ask him. He doesn't reply. Just keeps intently staring at me. Kid, do your parents know you're out here this late at night? Again, he just stares at me. You lost? Do you need me to call your parents to come get you? I say as I slide my cell phone out of my pocket. The kid just starts laughing. Not like innocent childish laughter. He is full on laughing, like I am the punchline of some huge cosmic joke. He is laughing the way an adult would laugh, not the way a kid watching cartoons would laugh. It's hard to explain. It just wasn't normal coming from a young boy. I am a bit freaked out at this point and not quite sure what to do. On a dark country road with a 7-year-old kid laughing at me at 3 a.m. in the morning. I decide to make my way back to my house and call the cops to report a missing kid or something. Stay here, okay? I'm going to contact your parents and have them come get you. I tell him. Kid finally breaks his silence. Lucky you're one of the good people, Jacob, the kid says nonchalantly. Then, he rides off down the road. He knew my name somehow. I watch him ride off into the darkness. Weird experience in my grandparents' yard at night? I am currently visiting my grandparents in rural northern Florida, and for quite some time, I have been spending evenings at their house by swinging on the set to relax and enjoy the nighttime atmosphere. During these moments, I typically listen to music. They are cow ranchers, so beyond the swing set, which is by their fence, about 40 or 50 feet from their house, there is a big field and then some woods and swamps. When I was younger I was super into paranormal stuff, so I used to get really spooked imagining something behind me or watching from the woods, but now that I'm older I rarely get that feeling. Tonight I was feeling it a little, but I tried my best to just brush it off while I waited for my eyes to adjust to the dark and listen to my music as usual. But then as soon as I started to feel alright, something really weird happened. I don't exactly know how to explain it. I saw a dark, black figure rush past me and disappear, and I felt it. Basically it felt like when someone brushes past you in a crowd but less solid. However, I felt its warmth and the rush of air as it passed by me. There was a bit of lightning out, so my first thought was that it was a trick of the light, but I wouldn't have felt that. A breeze wouldn't have looked like a dark figure, and it wouldn't be only in that one specific spot. I always faced the house, so there was no lighting behind me except the aforementioned lightning. It couldn't have been a bird or an animal because it disappeared, plus a bird couldn't get through the swing ropes like that. In the past I have had very mild hallucinations when anxious, but they don't ever feel real or manifest physically, just little things moving in my periphery is all. Never enough to elicit a reaction. Whatever that was, I felt it, and it scared the shit out of me and made me jump. I'm not completely opposed to the idea that it could have been a hallucination, but it just felt so real, and I usually don't hallucinate at all unless I'm extremely upset. Visited in the night and intentionally woken up. 2 weekends ago I had visitors in my bedroom. I was sleeping when I felt someone's hand. I thought it was one of my kids coming into the bed, so I shooed it away and lifted my blanket up so whoever it was could crawl in with me. Then a hand pressed real firm on the same left cheek, like it wanted my attention right that moment, you know. I got up on one elbow, no kid in bed, doors closed. So I'm looking around like, what the? Then. There. Right there. Right at the foot of the bed. Standing 4 feet tall, unmistakable silhouette, large head, small body, just right there. I sat straight up. When I did, the other one moved. It was right next to me, looking over me. I didn't notice it when I first turned around. But when I sat up, it moved up and away from me. Like it had been hunched over me. Its face is right next to mine. It had to be 7 feet tall. The creature was tall and thin, yet its head was proportionate to its body. It was dark, so I couldn't see features. Just movement and shape. They didn't look solid. Like they had this swirling liquid smoke moving across their bodies. I think they were partially cloaking themselves. It looked like in between the liquid smoke there was nothing. Like little swirling liquid windows, through which I could see the wall and carpet and dresser. So I'm sitting straight up looking at the small one. I wasn't scared, but my senses were all the way up. I think fear might have been trying to creep up, and I didn't want to ruin whatever this moment was about to be. I said, "Are you really here?" in my normal daytime voice volume, and it slowly started to move backwards. I saw the object and lunged towards it as quickly as I could, stretching my arms out wildly to grab it. But I missed it. I watched it fade out of sight, both of them. The whole experience lasted mere seconds. They woke me up. They wanted me to see them. They wanted me to know that they were present. Honestly, I feel like it was a gift. It was an absolutely remarkable experience, and I hope they show themselves again. I'll never want a dog door again. How do I start this story? I always ask myself this. I guess this story starts like any other paranormal experience that possibly involves an extraterrestrial type being. It was a night like any other, nothing eventful had really happened that day, and I was just settling down with my husband for bedtime at around 10:30 p.m. Our small dog jumped up to join us on the bed as usual and cozied herself up, ready to sleep. We turned out the bedroom light and started drifting off to sleep. For a bit of context, the house we were living in at this time was a small 2-bedroom house with no real hallway, so you could just about see into any of the other rooms no matter which doorway you stood in. You could see directly into the kitchen from the main bedroom and so on. The kitchen had a small back area where the toilet was situated, and just next to that was the back door, which had one of those plastic dog doors for a small dog. Back to the story, however. Just as I started to drift off into sleep, I was startled awake by the sound of the dog door. No big deal, I thought, my dog must have just gone out to do her business, right? Until I realized my dog was still on the bed. She had also perked up at the sound and started trembling and growling, so I turned to look in the kitchen to see this small grayish-skinned creature staring at me through the gaps of my kitchen chairs. It wasn't quite like one of those stereotypical gray aliens that is commonly brought up in these types of stories, because instead of the usual description of a big teardrop face with huge black eyes and an expressionless face, this one had a rather snarled up face, and the eyes were a little more detailed rather than like a black sclera-type eye, if that makes any sense. However, it had the other typical features: small and slender, maybe 4 feet tall at most, skin smooth, pale grayish, almost green, and devoid of hair and any kind of gender-typical anatomy. Like any other person, the sight of this creature scared the absolute shit out of me, so I practically shrieked when I noticed it standing in my kitchen, and I am not the type of girl that usually shrieks when scared like that, but holy shit, even recalling all of this to tell this story has me trembling. At this point the shriek I'd let out had woken my could sleep through an explosion husband up. I told him there was something in the kitchen, and he ran with our dog at his heels barking. As he ran, I heard the dog door flap open and close again, and by that time the creature was gone. The real kicker. As my husband was checking around the house, I checked the time on hubby's bedside table alarm clock. I was thinking it was maybe 11 p.m. at most, since I was only just drifting off to sleep after 10:39 p.m., right? Wrong. The time on the clock read 2:35 a.m. So where did that time go? What did I see that night? I know that it may be a fairly mild experience as far as they go. I think? All I know is I hope it never happens again, and that I haven't wanted a dog door in any of the houses I have lived in since that night ever again. Glowing red eyes outside my window. Hi. Basically, I am awake late at night because I'm watching over my dog as she's about to go into labor. I was in my kitchen to make a cup of tea while I waited, and I moved into the living room to wait for the water to boil. My living room is on the ground floor, but one section is elevated due to the house being built on uneven ground. Towards one end of the living area, we have a door with a glass window built into it, which leads out onto a veranda. As I looked through this glass door, I saw 2 gigantic red eyes staring back at me. At first I thought it was a reflection from something inside my house, despite the fact that we don't have any red lights from any type of electronics. I moved back and forth to try to see if the eyes were reflected in the glass, and as I moved closer to the wall on the side where the eyes were spotted, I could see that the eyes went behind the wall as I moved. In my opinion, this confirmed that the eyes came from a source outside of the house. As you can imagine, I got pretty scared and went back into the room my dog is in. My phone was in this room, so I didn't take a photo of what I saw. Besides, photo evidence was not on my mind either, as I didn't think this would be brought. I'm trying to think of a reason for why there would be two glowing, red circles outside of my house. I can't really think of anything, as I live out in the country, and this wall was facing woods and not any type of neighboring buildings. Not to mention, judging from the scale, the eyes looked like they were pretty close to my door. Like they came from a source that was on the railing of my veranda. I went back out to check on the eyes a few minutes later, and they were gone. Has anyone experienced something similar? I feel really threatened at the moment. The only thing I could think of was night vision goggles, which, after further research, don't even have red reflections in the lenses like in action films. And they were probably far too large as well. I couldn't see anything other than the red eyes outside, seeing as it was pitch black. If anyone has any ideas or similar experiences, that would be appreciated. I heard what I thought was my roommate outside my bedroom door at 3 a.m. It was not my roommate. Okay, so last night my roommate and I went to bed relatively early. I decided to take a bath, bubbles, candles, and all that. I hear my roommate make the noise she makes when she's frustrated and needs help. I get out of the bath and call out, no answer. I dry myself off, hop in bed, and turn on my PlayStation. A few minutes go by, and I hear it again. This time it sounds like it's right outside my door. I can see movement and light changing in the hallway under my door. I call out for Zelda, my roommate. Again, no response and no more movement. After about 10 more minutes, I hear her again. This time, it sounds like she is frustrated and in pain, almost crying. I message Zelda but get no response. I tried to get some sleep, but I kept waking up having to use my inhaler and nebulizer, and I felt like I was having an asthma attack. This happened repeatedly until about 9 a.m. when I got a response from Zelda. I've been in my room all night, I've been passed out. I meditated last night, so it definitely wasn't Zelda. We've both been locked in her room all morning because it's freaking us out completely. The noise sounded exactly like the fits she has when frustrated. It sounded like she was on my floor having a fit. Does anyone know what it might have been? Every night around 6 p.m., a man entered our house, lunchbox in hand, then disappeared. From the time that I was 7 years old until I was 12 years old, my family lived in the front house, and my aunt lived in the back house. From her living room, I could see our front door. I began to notice that almost every night, I would see an older man wearing brown mechanic overalls carrying a lunchbox stop at our front door. He would stop like he was unlocking the front door. He would enter the house. I told my aunt about the man, and she asked me to let her know the next time I saw him. The next night she was watching us, and I saw the man walking up our driveway. I called my aunt, and we headed outside. I asked her if she saw him, and she said that she saw him too. We walked to my house, and I watched the man stop at the door, unlock the door, and enter the house. We followed him, and he walked to the kitchen. Placed his lunchbox on the kitchen counter. He turned around, almost facing us, and disappeared. This happened for years until I decided to ask our neighbors, an elderly couple that all the neighborhood kids called Grandma and Grandpa, who had lived in the house before my family moved into our house. Grandpa asked me why I was asking, and I explained that it was out of curiosity. He told me that a man named Kenneth lived there. He was a mechanic, and he had a garden that he loved in his backyard. I asked why he moved out if he loved the house so much. He told me that Kenneth was coming home from work one night, and he died in a car accident. He never made it home. I said that was sad. I hope he didn't go through pain. Grandma said that he instantly passed as soon as the two cars hit. I told my aunt what Grandpa said about Kenneth, and she told me that maybe I should tell him what happened. I was 12 years old and had been seeing this man for years. He never scared me, so I decided to give it a try. He usually showed up around 6 p.m., so I waited at the front door for him. When he walked up the driveway, I spoke to him. I said, "Hello, Kenneth, you had an accident and never made it home from work. My family lives in your house. You're free to keep coming back here every night, but there's a beautiful garden waiting for you on the other side. You're free, and I know that you miss your garden." Kenneth looked at our house, looked down at the ground, then looked up at the sky. He disappeared for the last time. We never saw him again. I told Grandma and Grandpa what I did, and Grandma said that she saw him walking down the street, but he always looked right through her. He heard you, he saw you, and that is a very special thing. Don't ever forget that. What was this? So, I've told family and friends this story, and they've just shaken it off. When I was around 8, my family and I traveled from Ohio to Florida, and on our way back, we most likely stopped at a hotel in Georgia late at night before going to bed. Around, I believe, 4 a.m., I woke up to see a tall figure in a standing mirror that was in the corner of the room. It looked like a man, but I couldn't see any features. It was like a shadow. I thought it was my dad standing up and looking at his phone, but when I checked, my parents were both in bed with me. When I looked back at the mirror, it was standing over the couch bed where my older sister was sleeping on a pull-out couch, looking down at her. I ended up being super freaked out and falling back asleep. I could only see it in the mirror, it wasn't present in reality. If that makes sense. I could move, so I don't believe it was sleep paralysis, although that is a possibility. I was little, so that's not an impossible idea, but I don't think so. What was that? What did I see that night? I saw a ghost last night. I, 17 female, was doom scrolling to sleep because I can't otherwise. Around 2:30 a.m., I finally dozed off. I was sleeping facing my right side, where there's a mirror parallel to my bed's headboard. Not long after, as I later find out, my eyes just snap open, for no reason. And I see an invisible outline of a person. Like the white/transparent border of a person, maybe even a kid, facing me directly. Within the border of the person, everything was invisible. And as soon as I laid my eyes on this thing, it immediately went inside the mirror and disappeared. It all happened so fast. I get nightmares frequently, but I eventually know that I'm dreaming and, obviously, open my eyes after the nightmare. Last night, I clearly remember opening my eyes first and then seeing whatever I saw. As soon as that happened, I had palpitations, switched on the lights, and checked the time, 3:07 a.m. I straight up went to sleep with my mom. My dad slept in my room instead, and nothing else occurred. Everyone is saying it was just a nightmare or I imagined it, which I'm almost sure is the case. But I still find it weird because, usually, I fall into a deep sleep, especially if it's late and I'm exhausted. So why did I wake up randomly? That too, not long after falling asleep. What are your thoughts? If you have any suggestions/advice or theories, please share. Freaky experience when outside at night. Invisible creature? This is an experience I had 2 months ago while I was visiting my grandmother. I was outside around a couple of metal containers to sort and throw away garbage. The containers are placed around a tall hedge, and it's very dark outside. The hedge made it so the space around the containers was even darker than the surrounding area. The containers are also placed so that there's not a lot of space between them. It's a bit hard to explain, but it was crammed and made it difficult to visibly see the entire space at one given time, even with lighting. Because of the darkness, I turn on my phone torch and start dumping some trash into the containers. One of the containers that takes plastics was completely full, but I still tried to fit as much as I could in it. Because it was so full, a lid from a plastic container dropped to the ground and rolled to the edge of the container. I bent down to pick it up. Then, I thought I heard what I can only describe as an animal-like low growl or hiss. The sound was so audibly low that I first thought I imagined it. I shone my torch around the corner of the container, expecting to see an animal like a raccoon or a stray cat, yet there was absolutely nothing there. Not a pair of reflecting eyes or anything. I shook the feeling off and continued loading trash in the container. This continued for another half a minute, I think, until I heard what I can only describe as an animal-like scream coming from somewhere very close to me. The sound filled me with so much dread that I, with shaking hands, packed up my things and left, not looking back. On my way back, I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but when I stopped and listened, the sound also slowed to a stop. Though it kept going for a good half a second each time I stopped walking and only resumed when I started walking again. I kept looking over my shoulder, but I didn't see anyone or anything there. Since then I have been Googling around for sounds that may sound similar to what I heard. I haven't yet found anything that comes close to it. It sounded animal, but not like any animal I have heard before. It didn't sound like a typical cat or dog. Looking back, I don't know why I had such an emotional reaction to the experience. The level of dread that it instilled in me is something I haven't experienced before. This encounter left me shaking for hours. It is among the most terrifying experiences I've ever had. What really freaks me out is that I didn't see anything at all. The encounter could have been explained by some animal, but there was never anything there when I tried to look. Also, the footstep phenomenon is something I've encountered before while going to the store. It seems to only happen around a very specific stretch of road very close to the containers. Is it an invisible creature, an animal, or an auditory illusion? I'd absolutely love to get answers and hear similar experiences. So last night around 3:30 a.m. I was trying to fall asleep. My husband, my cousin, and I had stayed up late watching a comedy movie, and we headed off to bed around 1:30 a.m. My cousin is in the living room on the futon, and my husband and I are in our own room right off of the living room. My husband, of course, fell asleep nearly immediately after getting in bed, and I was tossing and turning for a few hours due to a chronic illness making it difficult to fall asleep. Around 3:30 I had finally found a comfortable position to sleep in. I was on my left side facing my husband when I heard, as clear as day, a raspy male voice above my right ear say, "Abigail." My full name. My eyes flew open. My husband sounds asleep, but his cat, who was sitting above his eye, had perked up and was looking right on the other side of me, where I had my back facing the wall. I shot up so fast because I thought someone was in the room. I looked around the dark room and found nothing. My cousin is fast asleep in the living room with my other cat lying next to her. I jumped back into bed and curled into my husband and squeezed my eyes shut. I kept saying, "Go to sleep. Go to sleep. Go to sleep." I kept repeating it over and over in my head. Eventually I did fall asleep. I told my husband and cousin what happened this morning when we all woke up. We've had paranormal activity in the apartment before, but nothing like that. Our bedroom closet is something I refuse to go into because every time I'm in there I get a deep feeling of dread and like someone or something is watching me. Lights flicker and turn on and off frequently throughout the apartment as well. Things will go missing only to be found where we already checked. I'm home alone, and there's someone sitting outside my parents' bedroom. Quick backstory before I get into what happened. My parents went away for the weekend because it was their wedding anniversary. It was just me in the house. I'm 19. I do have a sister who's 17, but she went to stay over at a friend's house that night. It was just me and my dog. Earlier that day, I had washed my bed sheets and put them in the dryer. A few hours later, when I went back to see if they had dried, I found out that they didn't, and it turns out the dryer had broken, which was very annoying. I phoned my parents and told them what happened. I went to look to see if I could find any bed sheets to put on my bed till mine dried, but there weren't any, apart from my sister's, which didn't fit my bed. I just decided that I'll sleep in my parents' bed since it was pretty comfy. Later that night, I'm in bed, and my dog is sleeping next to me, and I've got my parents' door slightly open just in case the dog wants to go out of the room in the night. I'm there just watching YouTube while waiting to feel tired enough to sleep when suddenly, I get a very weird feeling come over me. I felt like someone was watching me, and though it was a pretty freaky feeling, I was with my dog, so I wasn't completely scared/alone. I turned the lamp on and tried to fall asleep because my phone was about to die. It's almost 3 in the morning. I think it was like 2:55 when I woke up. I don't normally wake up randomly at those times. I look over, and my dog is asleep at the bottom of the bed, and I look to the door and see what looks like someone kneeling on the floor and kind of holding themselves up by resting on the wall. I was looking for probably a minute to work out what I was looking at, and it looked like a person, so I hid under the blanket and stayed under there for a few minutes. Eventually, I got the courage to look, and when I did, it was gone. I didn't properly go to sleep after that. It was maybe around 5-ish in the morning when I did finally sleep, and now my sleep schedule is kind of ruined. Not really sure what that whole thing was about. There was nothing by the door that could have made a shape that matches someone kneeling and leaning against the wall. I don't think my house is haunted because this is the first time anything has happened, and my parents' house isn't extremely old. It was built in the 80s. This was a few days ago, and everyone is home now, thank God. Nothing has happened since. Let me know what you guys think. That thing that I saw years ago that still haunts my thoughts. I used to have a twin house with my brother and his girlfriend on their side on a very short 4-house street with a dead end after my neighbor's front yard. One day late in the evening, when I turned my car in my driveway, I saw that thing in the light beams of my car at the end of the street for, 3 seconds before he ran off in one gigantic jump. Behind it on my drawing is the bent metal fence for cars because there was a river behind it, and I could clearly see that its legs were taller than it, which are at least 1 meter tall, making that thing pretty freaking tall too. I didn't see enough to know what it was, but I saw enough to know it was nothing I could know. Weird sentence, I know, but it sums it up pretty well. I remember perfectly its very round head, round back, very thin long legs, and no neck. It had no ears, no tail, and no hair, with a pinkish gray skin. I didn't see hooves, so I guess they were paws. I also kind of saw a bit of a long nose, but definitely not as long as, a dog or something. It also had very big round black eyes and something that did look like a dog's snout. I stayed hidden in my locked car for at least 30 minutes with a very thin opening in my windows so I could hear if it got closer to me, but I never heard anything and never saw it again. I called my sister-in-law, asking her to bring their dogs inside and to unlock their door, waiting for me to run in. I'm not much of a runner in life, but I swear I made the distance faster than I thought I could ever do it. I told them all about it, and they had to believe me because of the panic in my eyes, but I understand it's still hard too. Even I have a hard time believing what I saw. To this day, I still have no idea what it could have been, and I think it's going to bother me for the rest of my life. I don't think I was supposed to see this. For reference, I lived in a wooden part of Quebec in Canada with a native village on the other side of the river. It was too tall to be a dog, even a sick one. Too thin to be a bear, also even a sick one. No hooves, no, it can't be a deer. Also again, no ears or tail or long neck. Does anyone have any idea what the hell I saw? What did I see that night? I'm not entirely sure why I'm sharing this, but I suppose it's to find out if any of you know what I experienced that night. My mom died when I and my sister were very little. We are only 2 years apart. I'm 16 currently, and she's 14. At the time I was 13 and she was 11. So this was not very long ago. My dad was wanting to go to his sister's 21st birthday party. Now I know I was of age to watch my sister in a stay home alone for a little, but my dad did not trust me. One time I may or may not have almost burned the house down from lighting a tissue on fire. But back to the point. So my dad did not trust us to stay home alone, which was understandable. So we had no other choice but to go with him. I don't remember a bunch from the party, but I do know that my dad had a bunch to drink. Like a lot lol. He tried to make it home but knew it was not safe, so he told us we would just have to sleep in the car for the night. My sister was fine with it, but I was not. It gave me chills thinking about sleeping in a pitch black can in the middle of nowhere. But I knew it was the best option, so I went with it. My dad fell asleep instantly, it felt like, along with my sister. I just couldn't sleep, I was terrified. I know it's dumb, or was it? I tried sleeping all night until I accepted the fact that I'm not going to fall asleep, so I stayed up all night. I got out my phone and checked the time. It read 4:42 a.m. I remember this time so clearly. That's when I saw it. That big tall thing. Now not gonna lie, I have no idea what it was, but here's a description. A tall shadow-like figure with glowing red eyes and a smile that was just a big hole in the face for a mouth. My heart sank to my stomach, I couldn't move. I tried to scream, but no noise came out. It just sat there and stared at me with its awful smile. I wanted to cry, but I couldn't muster any tears due to my heavy brush of fear. I was about to wake my dad up when the creature disappeared into the night. I never saw it again. The next morning we went home, and I was terrified. I could not sleep right for weeks. I have no idea what I saw that night, but if anyone has an idea, please let me know. Even though it scares me, I'm interested in what I saw. Last night my buddy's doppelganger came by. So last night around 8 p.m. my best friend was supposed to drop by to drink a few beers and shoot pool. Let's call my friend Brian for anonymity's sake. After all the Father's Day ruckus ended, we were going to relax and wind down. Perfect Sunday night. At 5 minutes to 8, I hear a knock on my side door, our main entrance, so I get off the couch and head over to let him in. I open the door, and it's Brian, the same guy I've known for more than 15 years at this point. A slight smile on his face. The only thing missing was the 12-pack of beers he told me he was bringing. What's up? You forgot the brews, or did you drink them all on the drive over? No response. Just this calm smile, but he says nothing. I'm perplexed, to say the least. Before I can tell him to come in or ask about the silent treatment, he does a quick turn to his right and begins to walk back up my driveway. This is when I noticed his truck is not in the drive, not in any of the parking spots, or anywhere parked on the drive where I can see. I live in a rural area with a long gravel drive, and he's just walking back up it, no vehicle in sight. I finally snap out of it and say something like, "Hey. Yo. Brian. What's up?" Again, no response. He continues up my driveway until he reaches a bend and walks out of my sight, heading towards the road. I'm left dumbstruck. Did I offend him in some way? Is this a prank? I've known this dude for over a decade, he's never been a prankster to my knowledge. I close the door and head back to my living room. I grab my phone off the armrest and call Brian. No answer. Wait a few moments, and call again. No answer. I'm home alone, my wife and kids are still at her father's house. We celebrated earlier in the day so they could spend the evening with him. The house is unusually quiet with just me there. A couple of minutes pass. My phone rings. It's Brian. He says he's still on his way over, but he got pulled over on the way to the liquor store and got a seatbelt ticket. He's laughing about it and sounds like his usual self. He saw my calls but didn't want to answer while sitting on the side of the road with an officer writing out his ticket. I'm still confused, but I just tell him we're still on, come on over and we'll shoot pool like we planned. A little over 10 minutes later and I hear a vehicle door close. I'm a little jumpy, so I'm already out the side door and looking to meet him halfway. It's Brian, holding up his ticket for the seat belt in one hand and an entire case of beer under the other arm. He's joking that I have to pay for the ticket now since he paid for the beer. I didn't tell him what happened. I haven't told anybody. I tried to forget about it, and we just went about our night as if nothing had happened. I couldn't think of what to say. How do you explain something like this? I was flummoxed and just went with it. I hadn't had a drop of alcohol all day. I don't smoke weed or do psychedelics, and I've never had any kind of hallucinations or other mental health issue. I wasn't asleep or sleepwalking. I know what I saw, and I know who it was, or was supposed to be. I'm actually kind of hoping it was all some kind of prank because I honestly have no other explanation. The night someone watched us. We were in a friend's backyard, just chatting calmly. I was talking to a friend who was smoking, while another friend sat there, kind of spaced out, totally dissociated. At one point, I noticed my friend suddenly went quiet and stared fixedly at the neighbor's wall. Out of pure curiosity, I followed her gaze. On top of the wall, which was really tall, like 3 meters high, there was a shadow. But it wasn't a normal shadow, you know? It was black and looked different from the night, denser, weirder. You could only see it from the neck up, and the worst part was that it was clearly looking right at us. When it realized we had noticed it, that thing ducked down really fast. I froze. My friend saw it too, but the other guy didn't notice anything. I told them we should go inside, so we got up and did. The annoying part is that the feeling didn't go away. Even under the roof, we could feel like someone was still watching us from outside. It stayed like that all night, until the sun started to rise. So, that night still gives me chills whenever I think about it. And now I'm curious, have you ever felt like something was watching you too? Strange flute music at night in the distance. One night, around the time of the full moon in September of 2017, I had my windows open because it was nice and cool. Just as I was getting into bed, I heard a strange sound off in the distance outside. I stopped moving to hear it better, since I was making sounds moving the blankets. After about 5 seconds, it came back. I went over to the window to hear it better. I got right up to the window screen and listened. To my amazement, it sounded like a flute being played outside somewhere. I was dumbfounded. It wasn't just a flute, but it sounded mysterious. The strangest thing about it was the music. It wasn't complicated, but it was still strange and mysterious. The melodies didn't last long, probably less than 10 seconds. Then it started again. Each time was a different melody, and they were just weird, simple melodies, with rapid back and forth notes at times. Each time it started back up, it sounded like it was coming from somewhere else, like whoever was playing it was walking around outside. I had no clue what to think about it. I thought about going out on the front step and possibly walking around looking for it. It was mesmerizing. But I was also a bit concerned. I had no clue what it was. I was just thinking to myself, wow, am I really hearing this? I've never heard anything like this before. As I crept closer to the open window as I hid behind the blinds, it sounded farther away. I wish I would have started recording the audio sooner, but I didn't think about it until it was barely able to be heard. At that point, when I realized I had lost a great chance to record it, I paid particular attention to the melody. I wanted to at least have something left to remember the music by. The only melody I remember was the last clear one I could hear. I still remember the melody. I was cautious because I had no idea what it could be, but still, I wanted to go out and check it out. It didn't feel scary, but I'm a careful person. I think about worst-case scenarios, like stepping outside on the front steps, only to have my soul sucked away by whatever or whoever it was. Well, eventually, I did give in to my curiosity, and I opened the front door a wee bit and peeked out, and listened. I didn't hear it anymore at this point. I waited there, looking out into the dark neighborhood, trying to see if I could catch anything moving, but I didn't. Finally, when I felt that the threat level was low, I stepped out onto the front step. I was prepared to scurry back inside in a split second if I had to, but as I sat there, I happened to look right at a window of a neighbor's house across the street. There was a white streak of light that went one way, then quickly turned around and went back the other way and vanished. I thought maybe it could have just been the neighbors holding their cell phones as they walked past the window, but I don't know. I also remember slightly smelling apples when I was listening by the window before I went out. I had been melting some scented wax that evening, but not apple. I had been reading the 21 Lessons of Merlin around that time. In the book, Merlin played a flute to signal to Arthur that he was nearby, and Arthur would sneak out of the monastery, and they would go on adventures. I lived on a street that went north-south. There was a creek behind our backyards to the west that flowed north-south. Across the street from the front of our house was a row of houses, but behind them was a farm. There was a creek that flowed roughly north-south on their property also, with a small pond. I have no clue what to think about it. Still, I had an odd feeling about the whole thing, so I thought I'd share it. Please share your thoughts about it. Child laughing outside at 3 a.m. This happened to me about 3 years ago, and it still creeps me out. So where I live, we had a really bad hurricane one summer. It was one of the worst, and many people were left homeless because of flooding. A few of the towns by us had lost power completely, so there were no traffic lights or street lights or anything either. One of these towns was the home of a huge, abandoned insane asylum, and we decided it would be fun to take a trip there since the town was pitch black as hell and insanely creepy. So it was me, my now ex-boyfriend, and our 2 friends, and we parked a few blocks away and walked. There was an area that was part of this place that had a playground and an old schoolhouse, along with a few old houses. We went on the playground, yes, at 3 a.m., in pitch black, and seriously, it was the scariest feeling ever. However, the atmosphere made it exciting and filled with adrenaline. We were just messing around with each other, just being dumb teenagers, and then all of a sudden we heard a sound in the bushes on the other side. Of course we 2 girls were too wimpy to want to venture to see what the sound was, but the 2 boys did. So instead of being left alone, we followed. We never saw anything for a while, but it was so eerie that everything was pitch black and all you could hear were crickets. We're starting to head back to the road that takes us to our car, and all of a sudden we see a shadow move alongside one of the creepy houses. It was like if someone was standing on the side of the house, poked their head around the corner of it, and then disappeared again. When we walked past the house, so this side was now in view, it didn't look like there was anything there that could make this shape. At this point, we were really freaked out but kept convincing ourselves that it was just a tree branch or a bush, since it was too dark to see what else might be around. We start walking faster and pretty much pretend we didn't see anything and try to get our minds off of it when my ex's friend stops us and asks if we heard something. I said no, and they agreed no, but we are standing there in silence waiting, and I shit you not, we all of a sudden hear loud child laughter. Like if it wasn't 3 a.m. in an abandoned area, I would put money on it that there was a small child that saw something hilarious. So we ran back to the block where our car was parked, jumped in safely, and drove away as if we had just robbed a bank. Luckily it wasn't like one of those horror movies where the car stalls. We decided it was too freaky to ignore, so we went back the next day in the daytime. Stupid, right? Just to see if what we saw was a bush or something. None of the houses had any bushes or trees near any of them, and there was nothing around there that could resemble a figure standing on the side of the house. We have never been there since. Or at least I haven't. I see shadow people at night. I see shadow people when I wake up from dreams and have done so every so often for about 6 years now. I usually see just a simple shadow of a man-like figure. In the past the figure has peeked round the door, stood above me and my partner in bed, run at me, paced at the end of my bed, reached hands towards me and my partner on separate occasions, and most recently held a scalpel to my partner's head as if he was going to dissect her head. I have also seen a shadow of a fireman reach for my partner one night. Usually, the shadow man comes after I have had a nightmare. Sometimes he appears in the dreams, and other times I sense his presence in the dream, but I can't see him. The dreams always scare me awake, and I open my eyes to see him. He usually is an entire shadow of a man, but occasionally it is just a face above me. I am absolutely terrified when it happens. I believe someone is in the room, or I can tell it's not real, but I'm still terrified it may be real. He disappears when I turn on the light. I can move my body when this happens, so it's not sleep paralysis. An exception was one of the first times it happened. It may be the first time. I encountered a woman who resembled my great-grandmother, who passed away when I was young. She smiled at me, and then it appeared as though she dissolved. I felt no fear with this one at all. It seemed comforting. I could see her clearly and in color. I have been told that she looks out for me on the other side. I see the shadow figure when I'm stressed or not doing well mentally or scared of something. For example, after I had a fight with my partner, I saw the fireman figure above her. I assume the shadow figure took the form of a fireman because the fire alarm in our house went off that night we argued. I would rather not feel afraid of them anymore, and I'm always too scared to talk to them, but I will try. I was hearing church bells randomly at night in the Ozark Mountains. So about a year ago, my mom told me she heard church bells around midnight 1 a.m. at her house, and she was really creeped out about it because it was a random weekday night, not a Wednesday, as Wednesday church services, especially in the southern U.S., are common. She had never heard church bells before, day or night, despite living here for years. So it was really strange. Well, I'm staying with my mom for a bit, and just about an hour ago I was outside on the porch smoking, and I heard church bells for about 30 seconds. I stayed outside for about 5 minutes and tried to hear them again, to no avail. When I went inside, it was 12:29 a.m., meaning this wasn't some distant church marking the time that I could hear for some weather reasons. Mom got up about 45 minutes ago, and I told her about hearing the bells. She just nodded and said, "Yeah, I've heard them a few times, usually between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m., but I can't figure out why. I've lived in the South my entire life, and while church bells are common, I've never heard them in this town. Even so, they always have a reason. Marking time? Sure. Letting out service? Yup. Funeral or wedding? Of course. But random weekdays anywhere between midnight and 1 a.m. in a sleepy retirement town where you're required to join the HOA that determines things like your house color? Are there any explanations for this? I get how the easy answer is church bells, duh, but that just doesn't fit this community and the random days of it for me. Any stories or lore about church bells? This is in the Ozark Mountains if that helps any. I had a late-night paranormal encounter. Several years ago, when my son was a baby, my husband was covering the third shift at the hospital where he worked. My son, all of my kids, actually, was a baby that slept through the night early on. I usually put him to bed around 8:30. Instead of sleeping through the night like usual, he kept waking up every 60 to 90 minutes. After the third time I was woken up, around 1:30 a.m., I went into the nursery, picked him up, and angrily took him into my room with me. Suddenly I hear a loud bang. That freaked me out in my agitated state. I shakily go out into the hallway, and the door to the nursery is closed. I know I didn't close it, as I was carrying my son. To this day I wonder if something was in his room bothering him that kept waking him up. I think about it all the time. My oldest and youngest children slept in the same room and crib, and that was the only time I felt a menacing presence, but not the only time I had odd things happen in the room. Witch-like laughs heard at night immediately followed by activity in the living room. Last night I was smoking outside at around 11 at night when I heard witch-like laughter coming from behind my yard, where cotton fields and a junkyard are. It sounded like two people were laughing, but all you heard were the laughs and no other dialogue. For the first 10 minutes of hearing it, I didn't really care, but they started getting closer, and at the end, when I began panicking, it felt like I was being laughed at. I couldn't open the gate to let the dogs back in. When I went back inside, I locked all my doors and went straight to my room and stayed in silence. The whole house felt extremely heavy for some reason. I started hearing some shuffling happening in the living room, almost like someone looking through stuff. It went on for maybe 3 minutes and suddenly just stopped. Immediately after, everything just felt fine, which was odd. All the heaviness just went away. Any idea what any of this means? I had never experienced anything paranormal until the 2 bathroom mirrors began displaying a strange symbol after I showered. This phenomenon started in my restroom first and appeared in the other bathroom a few months later. Please help me figure out what I saw last night and why it gave me such a horrible feeling. This is my first time here, and I'm genuinely asking for help. I have felt and heard things all my life but rarely seen something clear until last night. I was driving back home in the middle of the night after a hangout with my friends. It was around 2:30 a.m. For your info, I live in rural Italy, and I was completely sober and aware of my surroundings. I was on the main road when suddenly I spotted a faint, still, orange light on the right side of the roadway. It was like 150 meters ahead of me and hovering above some bushes. It gave me the feeling of something that was peeking above the bush. Initially, I thought of some kind of road sign, but it was too dim and small, or maybe someone holding a torch or Halloween lantern. I have lived in the same place since I was born, and I have taken that road countless times, probably every night. I have never seen something similar in that spot, and yes, I do recognize animals' eyes, and it was nothing like that. As I was approaching it with my car, the light slowly and very steadily slithered away from the bushes. I could see the light was attached to something, or someone, but my headlights weren't close enough to light it up. I just looked as this thing crawled to the far right of the roadside and hid behind a tree. The only thing I could clearly tell was that it was not moving like an animal or a human. It looked like it was attached to something that was creeping or sliding because it was still and steady. When I reached that point with my car, I slowed down to take a look, but absolutely nothing was behind the tree. It vanished. I saw it for what was probably 10 seconds, but it couldn't have been a clearer sight. I had a horrible gut feeling, and I felt like I had to puke, like I was looking at something repulsive that I wasn't supposed to see. I'm having trouble sleeping, even though I have had similar experiences with the unexplainable. Has someone had a similar encounter? Can someone help me understand what I might have seen? Thank you in advance. Night terrors and the man who follows me. I've been known to have a lot of freaky night terrors, that admittedly lead up to me waking up crying or sweating, then calling my fiancée in the middle of the night. They can range from things that are possibilities, being attacked by bees, to things that people can't believe could ever happen, i.e., zombies, demons, those kinds of things. The creepiest part about these, for me, is that they happen for a few days in a row, and I'll have 2 or 3 in a night and then 1 or 2 for a few nights afterward, or 1 every single night for about a week, and then they'll stop for about a week or 2. Here are just a few that have scared me the most. When I was about 8, the night terror started. It began with a very simple one. I was in a giant greenhouse, admiring the fountains, trees, and flowers that surrounded me. I walked through it, gazing at everything in wonder. That's when I looked up and saw him. It was nothing more than a figure, but I could make out some very definite features: long arms, too long for a human, clawed fingers, very tall and hunched over. It was definitely male, and his breathing was heavy. He began to walk toward me, and I began to make out black cloth on his body. Then I saw gray skin, and before I could see his face, I woke up gasping for breath. In the morning, I found a new scar on my cheek that has never faded. There were others, but none that were this memorable. This seemed to be what started the worst night terrors. For the longest period I can recall, I did not experience night terrors, approximately 2 years prior to this occurrence, until I was around 14 years old. It was September, and I'd started having this recurring nightmare. I'd be showering, basically doing my nightly routine before bed. It'd be very warm, almost to the point where I felt like something was choking me, and the sensation of not being alone was present. Everything in my bathroom was exactly how it was in real life, a tan curtain that is hard to see through, though easy enough that I can make out the shapes of people, tan walls and counter, and white everywhere else. Large mirror lining the wall behind the sink, counter, and toilet. After a few minutes of hesitantly looking around and trying to calm myself, I'd turn off the water and look out the curtain, barely able to make out a figure. I'd go to open it, and the dream would end. I'd wake up scared but able to go back to sleep. One night, it changed completely. The dream was the same, except for the ending. The figure was no longer outside the curtain watching but instead behind me. I turned around and viewed the same man from the dream I had when I was 8. His skin was gray and wrinkled. It looked like the skin of a lizard, almost. He stood there, mouth stretched into a sinister grin too wide for anything human, with long, sharpened teeth and eyes so black that they sent a chill down my spine and left me feeling frozen to the depths of my soul. I woke up screaming after that. In about October of 2012, I had another very short one. I was walking through a burning field, and there was fire and smoke all around me. I didn't feel any sense of urgency, any need to escape. I just wandered, coughing occasionally. My feet were bare, but nothing seemed to harm me. Things changed when I looked down and realized that the field had changed to fill with corpses. They surrounded me, and I could feel the burnt, blackened flesh beneath my feet before I once again saw the man that had haunted me throughout my childhood. He was merely a shadow figure, but he was there nonetheless. Over the years of seeing him in my dreams, I'd learned to recognize him. This time, I woke up in tears. The worst, by far, happened last week. I suffer from claustrophobia, to the point where I feel physically sick if I'm in a small, enclosed space for too long. It makes riding in cars or sitting on planes very difficult and makes me very restless if I'm in any room for too long. The dream started with me locked in a glass museum case located in a giant room filled with people that looked like nothing more than shadows. The glass was at least 6 inches thick, and I was able to see out and look at everyone. I could feel their eyes on me, watching my face as something began to claw at it until I bled, and I woke up crying and gasping for air once again, my face absolutely burning from the feeling of being scratched. This next part is something I will never forget. I checked my face for any marks, any blood that might be there, but there was nothing. Only my red, puffy eyes, from crying, and my haggard, pale skin from too many days spent stressing over all the things that I juggled during the day. I set the mirror down and gazed around the room. It's not very big, so it doesn't take very long. What I saw by the doorway had me doing a double take, though. This is the part that I have yet to share with anyone, even my fiancée, whom I trust completely. In the doorway, there was a familiar figure, one that even now when I think about it terrifies me. The man stood watching me, teeth bared in his vicious smile and his black eyes staring at me with a twisted obsession. Since then, I've been seeing him out of the corner of my eye, feeling him near me as I type. Even now, I can feel him here, watching me type this, gazing at me as he always has. I have absolutely no idea what he wants or how long he's been following me. Maybe all my life, Maybe he latched onto me when I was young. But every time I feel him nearby, I am happy if there are people around. All I know is right now, I'm alone, and he isn't happy that I'm sharing this. My neighbor's TV keeps turning on at night. He's been dead for over a week. This might be nothing. Or maybe I just need to write it out and see if anyone else has had something like this happen. I live in a small apartment complex. Just 6 units. One of my neighbors, Mr. Langston, passed away about a week ago. Natural causes, they said. He lived alone and mostly kept to himself. Quiet guy. Routine. Every night, I used to hear his TV, usually some old game shows or westerns. He'd fall asleep to it, I think. It became background noise. I stopped noticing it after a while. After he died, the landlord changed the locks. I asked, and he told me the power was shut off too. But the past few nights, his TV has started turning on again. Around 2:13 a.m., like clockwork. But it's not game shows now, just static. Full volume. Like the snowstorm kind of static you don't really hear anymore. It only happens at night. Never during the day. And when I went to knock on the door, just to see if maybe someone was squatting or messing around, it turned off. Instantly. Like it knew I was there. I recorded the sound last night, thinking I'd show the landlord. When I slowed it down, I swear I could hear something beneath the static. A voice. It said my name. I haven't touched the door again. I don't know who would believe me anyway. A terrifying night. I am going to share with you one of the worst experiences, in my opinion. First of all, it took place on Wednesday, August 27th. Around 2 a.m. we were on the road to my boyfriend's house that evening. There were only 2 of us in the house. We had carefully closed the gate, the shutters, and the front door beforehand. Then we settled down, we put our things down. For my part, I headed to the toilets. Since the beginning of the week, my boyfriend and I have felt that the atmosphere was weird. That evening, after putting down my things, I went to the toilet, and I felt myself being directly observed by something. At first, I didn't pay attention to it. But at one point, I turned my head towards the toilet window, which overlooked the garden. Knowing that there was no sill on this window and that there was about 1.90 meters between the floor and the window, that's when I saw eyes looking at me. They were orange-brown and just stared at me. I thought it was a hallucination, because it was late and maybe fatigue was playing a role. But I still got closer to check if it was indeed a hallucination or if it was real. As there were only 2 of us, I was not at all reassured. I saw that it was eyes staring at me as I drew nearer. So I turned off the light. But the eyes were still there. Then, suddenly, I let out a cry of fear. I was horrified. My heart stopped. I ran off to join my boyfriend. We locked ourselves in my room and tried to reassure ourselves that maybe it was an animal, but that was impossible. So we called family and left the house because we weren't sure what was going on. When leaving, we locked the gate securely. The next day we came back to see the place. And upon arriving, the gate was once again open. We went in and walked around the garden. This is where we noticed a marble table placed below the toilet window. On it, we could see traces of legs and knees superimposed, as if someone had climbed up to look out of the window. What was odd was that there were no signs of a violation. No footprints, nothing at all, except this mark on the table, the eyes I had seen in the dark, and this open gate, even though we had closed it tightly. We left and decided to take our minds off things by going to a party in the evening. The next day, we wanted to come back anyway to check, because there were a lot of burglaries going on at the moment, and we were afraid that someone would try to enter the house. When we returned, we noticed that a room in the house was lit. However, we had turned everything off. It was very suspicious. It was not due to electricity, because the switch was indeed in the on position. Even more disturbing, no traces of footsteps in the house nor outside. It was really strange. Since we were alone in the house, we had also noticed unusual and strange smells, which had not existed before. However, everything was airy, but this disturbing smell persisted. I constantly had the feeling of a presence, as if someone was there. To this day, I still don't know what happened. I couldn't tell if it was really someone, a hallucination, or something else. But that moment was awful and terrifying. I felt a deep and intense unease at that moment. I would like to know what you think, because we are still very confused about what happened that night, and we are still looking for answers to our questions. Late night backyard visitor. Back in 1984 I was staying overnight at a friend's shared flat in South London. This was on the ground floor of a large converted Victorian house. There was a narrow path at the side of the house, which led to a small paved backyard, which the room I was sleeping in faced onto. The place was surrounded by similar houses in a very built-up area, not at all rural, not far from a busy main route into central London. I was woken up very abruptly around 2 a.m. by the most terrifying noises coming from the side and back of the house. I struggle to accurately describe them, as they were so weird, but here goes: high-pitched shrieking alternating with guttural growling accompanied by what sounded like 2 hooves, note, not 4, clattering around. It sounded like an animal in a frenzied state that had become trapped and was frantically running back and forth trying to escape. It was maybe about the size of a small pony, but ponies do not growl to my knowledge. This probably went on for about 5 minutes, although it felt like a lot longer. It was utterly terrifying. I was sitting up in bed, and my heart was beating like crazy. I couldn't bring myself to go to the window and draw the curtain to take a peek out, as the picture my brain had conjured up was of some kind of demon, which I didn't much fancy coming face to face with. After the adrenaline had subsided, I eventually fell back to sleep and in the morning told my friend and her flatmates about it. They had heard absolutely nothing, and I suspect were thinking I'd just had a bad dream. It definitely wasn't a dream. There were no animals larger than a dog in the surrounding area, which were not running loose anyway, so I have absolutely no idea what the hell it could have been. This incident made a lasting impression on me and still puzzles me to this day. Creepy. Something outside our house. So my husband, baby, and I moved into my grandfather-in-law's house, and he moved to Tennessee. We don't like being outside after dark because it feels like something is watching us. Last night, my husband went out to the pole barn to look for some tools to mount our TV, and he felt like something was following him, so he ran into the pole barn and shut the door. While he was running, his USB-charged flashlight, which he had just fully charged, shut off. He said he could hear footsteps and whispering looping around the pole barn. My gut was telling me something was wrong, and I knew he had his Apple Watch on, so I called him. He said as soon as his Apple Watch started ringing, whatever it was seemed to back off, and he decided to sprint for the back door. The ringing seemed to keep it from chasing him, and as soon as he came in, he shut all the windows and blinds. We have security cameras on the side of the house, but we have to go out to grab them and check the footage, and we're not doing that until it's morning. We only have one facing the pole barn on the side of the house. I hope we can see whatever it is. We live in rural southern Michigan, if that's anything. We're unsure of what it is and trying to research what it could be. My husband is part Native American Cherokee, and he's afraid it's a skinwalker, but he's not sure. Does anyone here have an idea what it is? And how do we make ourselves safe? We cannot move because we lack sufficient funds, and I am disabled. Weird night. So, my house has always had weird things happening. Kids looking upstairs and screaming/crying and refusing to go upstairs. People saying they've seen things on the landing/top of the stairs, and things in the bathroom falling at the same time every night, that sort of stuff. 2 nights ago my sister told me it felt like she was shaken awake. She was confused because her little boy was fast asleep next to her. She thought nothing of it and went to the toilet. I heard a banging noise like something had fallen/someone tripped, and then seconds later I heard my sister run back into her room. I texted her and asked if she fell. She said no, the noise came from her little boy's room, but he's fast asleep in her room. The light in the bathroom starts flickering, and we hear nothing else out of the ordinary. But I then notice my bedroom door open a crack, but I definitely closed it. I close it again and turn around in bed. My door is directly next to my bed. I begin to feel pressure on my back, so I turn around to get comfortable, and then I notice that my door is open again. I know it's not my sister playing pranks because I would have heard the floorboards creaking. Now my back is in absolute agony, and my sleep paralysis started again the night after. I know I haven't slept funny, because the ache and uncomfortable feeling in my back happened right after the noise happened and my door opened, and I was lying in the same position I always am. Has anyone else experienced something similar? I also want to mention that everyone dislikes sleeping in the room where this incident occurred. My other sister used to hear voices, and the doctors thought she was crazy. My cousin could never get sleep in there, as he felt uneasy, and his baby boy would never settle when he stayed. Now my nephew struggles sleeping in there and says it's a scary mister. He's 5 with autism, he doesn't understand how to lie about this stuff. I wonder if my back pain and sleep paralysis are just a coincidence, but I'm curious to know if others have had similar experiences. What did I see that night? I've asked this in several other places online over the years and have yet to find anyone with a similar experience. I have been given odd answers, from Fez to aliens to gas that escaped from the ground because of an earthquake. I don't really believe in Fez or aliens, and I'm not in an area that has earthquakes. I live on a farm, basically in the center of 160 acres. My parents purchased the property in 1959. So I was conceived and raised here and have spent most of my adult life here. I am very familiar with this farm. There are no nearby roads that we can see lights from, other than our driveway, and no yard lights. I also asked both of my parents if they had ever seen anything like this before, and their answer was no. So, this happened between April of 2003 and August of 2005. Almost positive that it was warm out, spring, summer, or early fall. I worked overnight at that time. I got sick at lunchtime, 2 a.m., and went home early. It's about a half-hour drive home, so it was between 2:30 and 3 a.m. when I arrived home. As I'm pulling up in the driveway to my house, I see through the dining room window this whitish and red swirling mass. It was probably about 5 feet tall, wider at the top than it was at the bottom, maybe 3 feet across at the widest point, and moving very slowly. All the lights are off in the house, and this mass seems to be making its own soft light. I had already turned the engine off in the truck when I saw this thing. At first I just froze, staring at it as it moved from the living room area into the dining room. I realized I still had my foot on the brake, then it dawned on me, it must be a reflection of the brake lights with dust swirling around. We live at the dead end of a 1.5 mile long gravel/dirt road. I felt a rush of relief and laughed at myself for freaking out. I take my foot off the brake pedal, but it's still there. I thought about starting the truck again and just tearing the hell out of there. But I can't stop looking at it, it is mesmerizing. I watched as it passed the window and disappeared into the kitchen. From that point, there are no more windows on that side of the house except for a small octagon one in the utility room, but there's a door between that and the kitchen. The only living thing in the house at that time was a small, mixed-breed terrier that was crated up for the night in the master bedroom, which is the next room off the kitchen and the direction this mass was headed. I finally got up the nerve to enter the house after about 5 minutes arguing with myself. I went in the back door, which opens into the utility room, and then there's another closed door that goes into the kitchen. This door has a vent at the bottom so the AC or furnace can easily draw air. I didn't turn the lights on immediately. I bent down and peeked through the vent to see if I could see anything. Everything was dark. I turned on the light in there, opened the next door, and flipped on the lights in the kitchen. My heart was racing, and my knees were probably knocking. I went through the entire house, turned on all the lights, and checked all the closets. Everything appeared normal, nothing moved around, all just like it was left earlier that night. I don't know what it was. I have never seen anything like it before or since that night. I've had many other paranormal experiences over my lifetime. A few of them were witnessed by other people. I was around 40 at the time this happened. That's all the info I can think of for now. Please feel free to ask questions if there's something that I didn't explain well enough. I'm hoping to find someone that's seen this or has an explanation for what I saw. Old lady walking at night. About 2 to 3 years ago I went on a midnight run. I lived in a very rural area and usually drove through a back way to the town high school track, so I'd get a few miles in here and there. It was 3 a.m. when I drove back, and I saw a person walking very slowly up the road, to the right side. It looked like they had rags on, and I couldn't make out the face, but it looked like an old lady based off the hair, walking barefoot. They had some sort of dog they walked on a leash, but the dog looked really strange, with ribs showing and all torn up looking. I never see anyone walk that late at all, so I got curious and turned around a few seconds after that. Nobody was there. Nothing. I brought it up to a few people I know, and they theorized it might have been because of the popular witching hour idea, where the supernatural is at its most prevalent. To this day, I wonder about what I even saw. When I was younger, I used to live in an apartment with my sister and her husband. He was out working for the weekend, so he wasn't there. I was alone in my room, I couldn't sleep. I heard this knocking in my bedroom window, and I saw this person that was trying to come down my window really slowly. I then realized that it was impossible. I was living in a basement, and the window was under a covered backyard balcony. I look at the person to see that it's kind of black and foggy. I saw the figure drop down and then rise as if it had absorbed the impact, and it slowly turned towards my bed. I closed my eyes to pretend I was sleeping, and then I felt a weight on my body. I just opened my eyes and ran to open the bedroom's light. I couldn't fall back asleep that night. I don't think it was sleep paralysis, because a few minutes later I hear my sister waking up screaming. When I asked her what happened, she told me she had a nightmare where she saw a black figure at the entrance of her bedroom. I ended up going in the living room close to her room for the rest of the night, and I didn't go to bed until morning arrived. After that, I started seeing tons of things in that apartment. My grandmother keeps talking about a dark figure next to her bed. What could it be? My grandmother is currently sick and bedridden. She had a pelvic fracture a few months ago. It's been a month, and she keeps complaining about seeing someone in the bedroom. A dark figure or a man. She says that he keeps coming in the room and stands in the corner staring at her. We keep all the lights in the house on 24/7. None of us see anyone or anything. She even has started yelling randomly at night, asking the entity to go away and leave her alone. Or she yells for one of us to come and chase him away. We're trying our best to comfort her, but this has been escalating for a while. At first we thought maybe she's just too tired or sleep deprived. Or maybe dementia? Now everyone in the house is starting to get spooked out. My mom says that in some legends it's said that old people see death in that form. Do you guys have any idea of what it could be or what can be done? The 2-year-old son claims he sees a ghost every night. Hope everyone is having a nice evening/night. After listening to a few accounts here, I thought I'd share something that's been happening. Exactly like the title says, my 2.5-year-old son keeps mentioning that he sees a ghost, and it's been almost daily, every night, for about 2 weeks now at our new house. My fiancé is 26, and so am I. FYI, the first time this happened was the first night after moving to our new house in Illinois. We moved only about 10 minutes away from our previous house. No, the house is not old, built in 2008, and there's been no deaths here. Also, he never said this at our old place before we moved here. I was putting my little man down in his crib for the night, and like I've done every single night for over a year, I said goodnight to all of his stuffed toys in his room, then to him, and then I kissed him on his hands. It's something he's had me do for a long time now every night. As I walked to the door to leave the room, I walked outside of his room, turned around to look at him with the door opened, and said, "Good night, love you," son's name, like I do every night. Now, instead of him saying night night, love you, too, like he always does, he was simply lying on his back, pointing to, and I know this sounds corny AF, the corner of his room. He then said, very clearly, "Ghost." I was like, WTF. Did I hear that right? So I asked, "What did you say, bud?" And he replied, in the accent of a toddler, "Ghost. In my room." He didn't seem scared or shocked or anything. But TBH, I was a little weirded out, so I just said, "You're okay, bud." "Where?" He pointed at the corner again and said, "Ghost." I told him not to worry, to try and get some sleep, and said GN to him and told him I love him again. He repeated "Ghost," then looked at me and said, "Love you, Dada," and then I closed the door. Now before I go on, I just want to say we have never talked about or mentioned anything about ghosts with or around him. There isn't one situation I can even think of that we have talked about ghosts with him, and even if we did. He's freaking 2.5 years old. I'm confident that he wouldn't even have the slightest memory or understanding of what we would be discussing. Also, the kid doesn't even know what death is, and I don't think he would say that just to try to freak me out. Anyways, the next day, I asked him if he remembered what he said to me last night around dinner time at his grandparents' place, my soon-to-be in-laws, and he clearly said, "Ghost. In my bed." WTF? Lol. Well, we all just kind of laughed it off because we all thought maybe he heard about them at daycare during this past Halloween or something. I mean, we really have no idea where else he could have heard about ghosts. Last night he did it, too. Pretty much every single night we've been here. Now, to be honest, there is no feeling of bad energy here whatsoever, and nobody in either my fiancés or my family has passed too recently. Does anybody have any experience in the same situation I'm talking about? Have you personally experienced a similar situation with your child, or have you heard about it elsewhere? I'm interested in learning about the opinions others may have on this matter. Because not only is it a little weird, but it's pretty consistent, and like I said earlier, he's never done this at our last place. He's never done this at our previous location, not even once. Thanks to anyone willing to comment with advice or shared experiences. 3 a.m. haunting? Last night I had another sketchy night. I woke up, around 2 a.m., to something nudging me again. It kept feeling like something was watching me. I kept hearing something knocking on the staircase wall, behind my closet dresser again. My watch alerted me that it was 3 a.m., which scared me, and I began to feel a strong spiritual energy around that time. I thought I heard something make a noise in the room next to mine. I kept nodding off to sleep and waking back up to something waking me up. I played a protective mantra, at that point, for at least an hour, and halfway through it, the video mysteriously stopped by itself, like whatever was haunting me did not want the mantra to play. That's like the 10th time my phone has done that. Still wonder what I saw. When I, 16 female, entered middle school, around 7th grade, my family owned a Chihuahua named Gabby. Gabby was my dog, my best friend. She would cuddle and bark at everyone but me, and she had a favorite raccoon toy. Before she died, I remember a weird occurrence. We had just adopted a black and white pit bull mix, who we still have, named Moose. One night, I let the dogs out before bed. I watched them, keeping my leg in the ajar slider to stop our indoor-outdoor cat scooter from going inside. I had to squint a bit. At the far back of our yard, I swear I saw what appeared to be a wolf running in place and looking at me. This happens for a few nights after until I tell my mom. She told me, it's probably a reflection of light. One night, having had enough, I take my phone, slider open, and attempt to take a photo, but when I look at my phone, nothing is there. I was in shock. I brought Gabby to bed. Moose slept in the living room with my mom, and I tried to sleep. The next morning, I'm looking for Gabby to let the dogs out before getting ready for school. And I found her dead by my bedroom door. Me and my older brother, buried her in the backyard with her favorite toy after school. Sometimes, I still wonder what that was. So, does anyone have any idea what it was? I want to see it again. Dark figure. I'm always a skeptic. But last night I saw a dark figure walk from in between my neighbor's house and mine, turn, and walk up to the front door of my neighbor's place. It stood there for a moment. Nobody's home next door right now because they are out of province for a few days. I'm also in a small village of 500 to 600 people. It's 3 a.m., and nobody should be going up to that door. I, being the guy I am, started to approach this person. I was outside for a smoke, woke up abruptly for no reason last night, and had a heavy craving for one, which is fairly normal at this point. I exclaimed, "Excuse me, can I help you?" I had taken 3 steps towards my neighbor's place, and the person disappeared right before my eyes. In disbelief I rubbed my eyes. Then again, because what the heck? The front of the house and side are illuminated by a small solar floodlight. There were no shadows cast by the moon, it wasn't even out last night. There was no wind to blow trees around, nothing that I can now try to think of that would have caused me to mistake a shadow or a bin for a person. I turn on my phone's flashlight and walk over, check the door to see that it's locked, and check beside their house on the other side. Nada. I have expressed permission to be on their property. My wife confirmed she saw the same thing 3 days ago around midnight. The figure was tall looking but was wearing something like a hat or a bonnet or something on their head, wearing all black, with something like a cloak or trench coat or maybe a dress with little white specks all over it. Black pants and shoes. The figure did not turn towards me, I could not see a face. I want to see this again. I hardly believe that I saw it for the first time. Any tips for doing this? Should I just sit outside for a few hours watching the front door? Would hanging around scare it off? I just need proof that this wasn't my eyes playing tricks on me, apart from my wife seeing the same thing a few days ago. Also, do digital cameras pick up the supernatural, or should I go buy a disposable with a flash? Something is stalking me in my bedroom and jumping onto me at night. I'm not sure what to do. So this started 2 nights ago. I'm hoping someone can give me a guess about what could be going on. Note, I do have nyctophobia. Despite my childhood trauma, I don't find being outside at night as bothersome as being inside a dark house or room. So on one side of the room I have white Christmas lights dimmed down a bit for some light at night. Luckily that doesn't bother my fiancé, but he could sleep upside down in a hurricane lol. So 2 nights ago I woke up in the middle of the night and went to the bathroom. I couldn't get back to sleep after. I have bad insomnia. I was just lying in bed bored, debating on just staying up all night, but was pretty much just staring at the ceiling, just chilling, waiting to get tired again. All of a sudden it was like every sense I had yelled danger, the hair on my body stood up, I had goosebumps all over, and I was overwhelmed with fear. I can't exactly describe the feeling, but if you guys have ever been put in a dangerous situation, you might be able to relate. Anyway, this is where things get weird and confusing. So there was a figure in the doorway, except I couldn't see it clearly. It's big and hard to explain. So my senses were telling me, hey, there's something there, but my eyes couldn't really see it. I could follow it with my eyes, I could sense it, but I couldn't exactly see it. It's hard to explain. Now whatever this thing is, it wasn't like a solid shadow, but it wasn't like a humanoid shape that I could tell. It was like a mist or smoke but not dark. Tall and kind of shaped like if someone put a sheet over themselves and stood there. That kind of shape. Yeah, I know that doesn't make sense because I couldn't really see it, but I could see it. Almost like I knew it was there, but it was possibly camouflaging itself? Again, I'm sorry, but it's so hard to explain. Well, it went from the doorway to the other side of the room at the end of the bed. It didn't walk, it was more like it teleported. It jumped from place to place. Meanwhile, every part of me is telling me to run in danger. Then I see it go from the end of the bed to my side of the bed. At this point I sit up, and my senses are going nuts. I can and cannot see whatever is there. It moves to the end of my bed directly in front of me. My instinct is saying danger, and every part of me tells me to move and move now. Well, I didn't because, as I said, I could see it but not see it at the same time. So going by what my eyes see, I thought maybe I'm just kind of overreacting. A few seconds later it lunges at me, and the best way I can describe it is, it jumped in me? I couldn't yell, I tried. I was shoved back onto the bed, and the feeling was a mix of static and electric shock. Think of if you held onto a livestock electric fence for a few seconds, over my entire body. I managed to throw my arm out, smacking my fiancé and grabbing his chest. I basically grabbed onto him for dear life. He jumps up, absolutely confused and half asleep. He sees me basically scared out of my mind, and things fade away. I couldn't talk for a while, but I could move. I explained to him what happened, and he just hugged me until I was able to fall asleep. Last night I had a similar thing happen. But this time I tried to really focus on whatever it was with my eyes. Because once that feeling came over me, I knew it was coming, and I couldn't really do anything about it. This time I focused, and it went to the top left corner of the bedroom, and it was more shadowy this time. It darkened that corner of the room/ceiling, which isn't too far from the end of my side of the bed. I sat up ready for something to happen, and it again jumped on/in me. I managed to grab my fiancé, who was already awake. I still scared the hell out of him, but he didn't see anything, and I was alert and awake but wasn't talking, and the weird electric feeling in my body lasted a while before fading this time. But it didn't move like the night before. It was basically at the doorway, in the corner of the ceiling, and then bam, right onto me. It happened very quickly. The night before, it was like it was trying to figure out what to do, maybe? Or observing before jumping on me? Not sure. Last night I did use a sage smudge before bed because I was worried, and clearly it didn't help. I try to save weekly at the least. Now, I've had experiences of the paranormal before, growing up in a haunted house. Yes, I believe in ghosts and all that. I've been told by a few people that due to things that have happened and continue to happen, there's a chance I'm possessed, or at the very least, I have an evil something attached to me. Which wouldn't surprise me at all. I also have nightmares every night, and it's been like this for years. But this, whatever this thing is new, it's scary as hell, and I have no idea what to do. Does anyone have any ideas? Also, my fiancé is very supportive, and he also believes in the paranormal. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'm a bit scared to go to bed tonight. Weird occurrences overnight. I work at an old building around 140 years old, formerly a vicar's home. At least 2 deaths have occurred at the building within the last 30 years, one of which was relatively recent. Slightly vague due to anonymity, we are pretty used to weird things happening in the building, as it is now used as a care setting. There are 2 people who work overnight, myself and one other person. I am an ex-smoker who quit using a vape and still uses it every now and then overnight and goes outside to do so. I have always considered myself a pretty handy person. I can look after myself and am quite comfortable working overnight and don't worry myself too much with stories of what has happened to others because I'm bigger and scarier and realer than anything that could be here. I'm not bigger or harder than anything, I just think I am. So I just get on with my job. But about 15 minutes ago I went out to use my vape listening to that Peter Crouch podcast, and when I got out of the corner of my eye I thought I saw a figure of a person there, but I ignored it and continued scrolling through my Spotify, making a little playlist, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I saw something, so I looked up again and thought I saw another half figure. By this point I was pretty spooked but hadn't quite had enough nicotine, so I just carried on as I was. A little bit of info on the weather. It's a pretty cloudy but dry and breezeless night, so I know the next part wasn't wind. I had a couple of jobs to do outside, so I turned the podcast off but put off doing the jobs because of how uneasy I was feeling, so I headed back inside. As I shut the door, I heard what was almost a mix between talking and singing in a woman's voice or a high-pitched man's voice. The area I was in is somewhere a lot of people feel slightly uneasy, and some people refuse to be out there alone, but nobody has said anything directly. The person I work with was sitting inside with the TV on silent with subtitles doing some online shopping, so I know it wasn't her. Every hair on my body is standing on end at the moment, and I don't want to move. I came back inside and sat with my colleague because I am not being alone here. I have such a feeling of being watched. I was visited by something last night. Yesterday, while strolling through the forest, I had an experience that continues to linger in my mind. I decided to watch the new movie Dracula at home to experience it on a deeper level, and while watching, I felt overwhelmed by the overall experience. However, during the scene set in the church with all the paintings of Jesus on the wall, I struggled to focus on the dialogue because I was primarily aware of the Holy Spirit helping me return to a calm state, which provided me with comfort, an unusual feeling for me since typically nothing can stabilize my emotions when they start to decline. As I'm watching the movie, my dog immediately gets up and starts inspecting something behind a chair I have as well as behind it. He doesn't want to get too close, and he wouldn't go in the bedroom when he looked in, he just kept a good distance. He did this 3 times, and every time it happened, I could feel the shift in energy before he did. I didn't see anything, though, but when I went to check it out, I felt something hovering over or behind me. When I looked up to my right, I could see a white light that took off pretty quickly, and it startled me a lot. After this, my roommate's cat decided to go over to the chair and look at it too in the same way, so they both saw whatever this thing was. Although she has never sat on that chair before, she decided to jump up on it and stare at me for a good 10 minutes with an expression that seemed to convey an understanding of the situation. She slept on that chair all night and is still sleeping on it now, which is wild to me because she never touches the chair or stays in one place too long. The chair belonged to my Nana, but I've had it for years now and have never felt anything like this. I couldn't even say I felt her either. All I felt was a sense of curiosity and calm, and almost a feeling of, this thing knows what I'm going through right now, that it can pick up on my sadness as well as my heightened state. I have no idea what it could have been, and neither of them are seeing it again tonight. I'm not feeling any presence either anymore. I'm not sure if maybe my Nana came to visit me or the Holy Spirit, because I'm not a very religious person, but in that moment last night I did let those feelings of God and peace flow through me. Nothing like that has ever happened to me. And it wasn't like I was searching for anything, because it was my pets who tipped me off that something was there lurking around the chair and in the bedroom. Does anyone have an idea of what that could have been? The night I broke the rules, Native American legend. This is absolutely 100% true. Never wanted to share it until now because I know what happened, as does my brother, and I don't really need to hear criticism. Okay, so here in the Sierra Nevada is the only place I've heard of this specific one. Really, it's more of a local legend. You can take this with all the grains of salt you need to, but I swear this story to be true, and I have my brother to back me up. This might be a bit long. So growing up, I didn't live on a reservation but about 5 miles away from the closest one. It actually butts up to my grandfather's property. Still grew up with everyone. All the elders are very spiritual. My dad was a special case. He was surrounded by paranormal activity all through his childhood. He'd talk about it when he was drunk, which was quite often. Coincidentally, he drank to keep the demons at bay, so to say. There was this one legend that he told me early on. Living in a very rural mountain house on a road known for its activity, even rural compared to the small town, boys and men would pee outside quite often. Just quick and easy. My dad, though, always kicked dirt over his pee, yes, like a dog. One time, when I was very young and imitating him, I asked him why he did that. He told me a story that I never forgot, because it scared the shit out of me. He said that there's an ancient medicine man, neither man nor beast, something in between. Now this medicine man wasn't a healer, he was evil. He told me that when a native man or kid, usually kids, wouldn't step off the trail to pee, they needed to kick dirt over their pee. If they don't, the medicine man, he has a name that you're not to speak, or he'll hear you, will walk the trails at night. Once he comes across your scent, he'll pick a handful of dirt from where you peed and smell it. He puts it in a medicine bag he wears around his neck and begins to hunt you. He hunts at night, especially if you're a bad kid. I will mention that his name starts with a W and sounds like Tatmoo. Gives me the chills thinking about his name. Well, my brother and I kind of grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. At the time I was a big pothead with no money. My brother was a full-blown drug addict who moved back in for a few months just as I had when I was about 19, putting him at about 26. We were doing a lot of bad stuff, especially in the neighboring community. Definitely bad kids. So when I was in high school, there was a guy who moved on our road, between our place and my grandpa's ranch. He grew a lot of weed. I knew the trail to get there, and I and a few buddies went and cut his crop in the night one summer. It was a good summer, needless to say. Bored one night hanging with my brother, I told him about the crop. It turns out he knew about it too. We decided to go that night and get some fresh buds. Now our road is long, windy, one lane, and dark. Extremely dark. There was a little moonlight out so we could see but not much, our eyes adjusted. My brother, being paranoid, on stimulants, decided we should walk the old railroad grade that runs parallel to the road but beneath it. It's where people traveled when the road was still a railroad. I agreed but said we should go up to the main road because that's where the trailhead to the guy's place was marked with a red gate. Well, my brother, a genius, he thinks he is, says the dogs will bark and there will be trail cams. The time I went, We just took all the trail cams and no evidence. I digress. He says, let's stay on the trail and cut through the brush. So we tried that and failed, as the brush was practically a wall. Now at this point we're a lot closer to our grandfather's property, and we're close with a guy who rents a house on the other side of the property. About a 1,200 acre property that I now live on, so we decided to go to his place and stay the rest of the night. A few things you should know. My grandpa refuses to speak about anything paranormal, but he's adamant that you do not go on his property without permission, and if you are given permission, you stick to where he tells you, and lastly, you never ever go past the yard on his property at night. We try to get my dad to talk about it, but he'd just say, you don't want to be there after midnight. Trust me. My dad is not a fearful man. Along the road there's a waterfall where a bridge crosses. At that point the railroad grade is thousands of yards beneath it, so you cross the creek. It was dry, as it was the middle of summer. We stopped there, and I took a pee. Well, we both did. I don't know why, but I didn't kick dirt. I thought about it while walking away but didn't say anything. Okay, at this point I realize I forgot to mention I had a shotgun and my brother had his compound bow, one of the reasons we decided to stay off the road even with little traffic. This is when shit kind of hits the fan. There are 3 houses on my grandfather's land. We were coming up the hill to the one he rents to a lovely old couple. We are quietly walking up a road that was once used for transporting cattle but has not been in use for some time, as we are not supposed to be there. To our left, there is an open field. At our 10 o'clock position, the road continues, and to our right, the road is cut into a hill, creating a wall of dirt above us. I'm 6 feet 1 inch to give you an idea of the height. As we're walking, well, creeping, really, on high alert, we both hear something. It sounds like a horse, but there are no more horses on the property, not for years. We both exchange looks that we can barely see as it's so dark, and before we know it, it's running at us. Not galloping. Running, 2 hooves hitting the ground in very long strides. Strides that tell you this thing is probably 2 to 3 feet taller than us. I'm not too prideful to admit that I froze in my tracks, shotgun in hand. Didn't even aim it. My brother leapt backwards and claims he drew his bow but didn't release an arrow. We were dumbstruck. This thing is coming at us like a freight train in a few seconds that felt like hours, and you can hear it breathing, huffing hard like a buffalo or a very big bull. We could hardly make out the outline, but it was tall and humanoid. My mind pictured scraggly 4 horse-like legs running on cloven hooves in my last few moments, or so I thought. As the thing gets spitting distance from us, I realize, and my brother later recounts, there's something chasing it. I have no frame of reference for what was behind it because it drew in the darkness and was blacker than the night. That's the only reason you could see the outline of this thing that I likened to what a saber-toothed tiger must look like. It was fast. It had run the same distance it had in just a couple of seconds, it seemed, and was on the hoof thing's tail just as its hoofs planted one last time mere feet from me. With one more shoof of breath, it leapt clear above us onto the bank behind, and whatever was chasing it slid hard like a horse breaking for dear life and then poof. It was just ducking gone. Nothing. All we hear is the thing now still running behind us through manzanita and oak trees, snapping giant limbs like a bulldozer in the night. We stood. Regained our composure, what was left of it, and charted our course. We still had quite a ways to go to get to our friend's place. Do we go in the direction of whatever was behind the thing, or do we take a lesser used trail behind the old folks' house and towards the hooved beast still snapping limbs and stalking around in the darkness? Might have been foolish of us, but we both decided we don't want to deal with whatever was chasing it. So we went towards the beast as quietly as we could. We heard the odd step and branch break behind us as we made it the rest of the way. We both felt an immediate sense of calm the moment we passed the gate that bordered the yard of the house. We woke up our friend and shared a cigarette as we told him the story, still shaking and hardly wanting to speak about it. I still don't know what we found. We never told Grandpa, and this is the first time I've written it. I'm 30 now, and I live in the house that we were trying to make it to all night. I don't venture past my gate at night unless I'm driving out. I think we saw the medicine man, though. My brother still isn't sure. Not in real life, but I believe I saw what was in my grandma's house in a dream. I am certain that there was an entity in her house. I encountered it but never saw it. I was too afraid to look. You could hear the entity walking around upstairs even when no one was present. I always had this sense of fear in that house, even before becoming aware that something was there, and it wasn't until my teens when other relatives finally admitted they had experiences too, after downplaying and denying it throughout my entire childhood. Anyway, in my dream, everything was as it really was in real life, in her house. That never happens in my dreams. So I was upstairs doing something when an old lady appeared on the landing upstairs, behind me. I immediately felt uneasy. She wore a pearl sheen, pale seafoam nightgown and had white, bushy hair. She asked where my grandma was, which felt strange because she would have had to pass her to come upstairs. Every cell in my body just screamed to get past her and downstairs. I told this woman that I'd gladly go get my grandma for her and tried to casually speed walk past her. Her face immediately transformed into demonic and ugly. An evil, delighted scowl. She grabbed my arm, and I felt burning, which jolted me awake. Many years later, my pap, a very reasonable and logical man who didn't entertain nonsense, was home alone while my grandma visited family in Oregon when he was awakened by the sound of water running in the bathroom across from his bedroom. He looks across the hall, and there stands a woman in white. He immediately assumed someone had broken in and went to grab his gun, but in the split second it took him to grab it from his nightstand, she was gone. He searched that whole house, top to bottom, every door and window, but everything was locked up tight. Even my aunt, who used to laugh at me when I told her that I felt something awful was in that house, had something happen that she won't talk about. She just refuses to go upstairs at night and won't even go up alone during the day. My dad, my brother, and my other aunts and uncles all had their experiences, too. Ironically, it never messed with my grandma. Which laughter sounds outside around 3 a.m. My window is wide open with a cover screen. I finally was able to get to sleep earlier than usual. I had a dream I was skateboarding, and a big crowd of other random skaters joined me. One of them accidentally flicked their deck while trying to do a trick and hit my shin right above my ankle. It hurt lol. I woke up, and moments later I heard the most frightening laughter I've ever heard in my life. It sounded as if it came from the street on the side of the house. It was a woman's laugh. I find it strange that I heard this sound after getting injured in my dream and waking up. We've heard loud crawling on our roof, and I can also recall a time I heard a woman on my roof humming while I was smoking, and when I went to exit the garage, it got so loud, like it was right above me. I was paralyzed and too afraid to look at what I was hearing. I was struggling to get the door open with the keys while I began to sweat in terror. These phenomena are starting to worry me a little bit. I would like answers. A bright white flash of light filled the house at 3 a.m. So the other night I was lying in bed after having gotten home from work when, for a split second, and I mean like a really quick burst, my entire house flashed white. Our house is pretty open, so I can see from one end to the other where I was. This flash was like hospital LED white. It didn't seem to come from any specific source, but rather appeared to emanate from nowhere. Now I was absolutely freaked out by this, so I sort of just lay there not knowing what to do until eventually falling asleep. The next morning I mentioned it to my dad, who's worked for the power company for well over a decade. Rather than explain it, he tells me that he's experienced the same thing near the same time but thought it was his eyes playing up since he just had surgery. One of my friends mentioned that it could have been a power surge causing our lights to flicker, but we only have warm glow lights throughout our house. The street light outside my house is also an orange color. I'm so weirded out by this, and any explanation would be great. Night shift. I've worked at a cafe for 7 years now, all throughout high school and now into college. I'm technically management now, because I host, make pricing decisions, and close the restaurant. The owner's mom is in Arizona visiting family for a few months, which means I close the restaurant by myself. So I go about my business, walking the cooks and busboys out to the back door and locking it after they've left. I then head back to the front of the house to grab the cash drawer, credit card slips, and keys, and head back to the other end of the restaurant where the office is. The office light, in all the years I've been there, has never been turned off, not after you leave the room, not even when you leave at night. I've had talks with them about why, but the owner's mom is not negotiating on it and always wants it on. Anyways, I walk into the back and go to unlock the door, to find the office light off. It was on earlier, when I went back there, and I'm the only one with keys to the door. I know I didn't turn it off because it's not a habit of mine. I've never turned the light off once. I checked the side of the wall and flicked the light on. So it was, in fact, physically turned off. Again, I'm alone, and I'm the only one with the keys, so I have no clue as to how the light was off. There was an older man who had a heart attack and died in the restaurant in the bathroom about 9 years ago, so people always say the place is haunted. I've heard my fair share of kitchen pots clicking after the kitchen staff has left, or random slips printing off when no one is by the order screen to click print, and even the sound of toilets flushing after close when it's only me around, but this instance freaked me out the most. Last night while closing, the door to the inside of the restaurant slammed shut in front of me and the head chef. We just looked at each other with our jaws dropped. No one was in there, and the clear glass door is behind another clear glass door to the outside, which had already been locked, so it couldn't have been the wind, since it was behind an outdoor door. I'm kind of on edge, as it seems as though the more I'm closing in alone, the more things I'm noticing happening. It really picked up when the owner's mom left town and I was left to close by myself at night with no one else. I don't want to get yelled at for not wanting to close, so I'm thinking about making the back of the house guys wait for me and leaving altogether. I saw something after my best friend's 21st birthday party. She drank, and so did most of our friends. My friend Josh and I served as the designated drivers for both vehicles, responsible for ensuring everyone arrived safely at the bar and returned to my apartment and my best friend's residence. As such, we remained sober throughout the evening. Our apartment was located across the street from a large, well-maintained cemetery that is newer, well-lit, and equipped with walking lights along the path. Since it is entirely enclosed, when the 8 intoxicated friends we were transporting returned to our residence and wished to play hide and seek in the middle of the night, we thought, why not? They are drunk, loud, and unable to move quickly, so we can round them up if needed. Let them wear themselves out like toddlers. So, we had them hide, pretended to do a countdown, and then we promptly went back to the parking lot to smoke a ciggy and climbed on the hood of my Durango. While we were talking about the night, listening to our dumbass drunk friends trying loudly to be quiet, and watching the stars, it suddenly became darker, not because the lights dimmed or the area became less illuminated, but because everything surrounding the lights appeared darker. And you know when you realize all of a sudden the birds and bugs aren't making noise anymore? It got quiet like that, just out of nowhere, but everything was still making noise, and I don't know how to describe it any better. Then there was an orange, impossibly bright glowing ball approaching us rapidly from the foothills in front of us, changing shades of orange the entire time. It was always orange and glowing, but it didn't emit light like any source I've ever encountered. Like there wasn't any luminescence coming off it, it was. It was overwhelmingly orange, contrasting sharply with everything else around it, which made it appear to glow. Then, it appeared directly above us. It came from a great distance, y'all. The horizon over the foothills is about a 45-minute drive away, yet it arrived in just about 5 seconds. And then it just hung there. It was roughly the size of a beach ball. It appeared solid orange, resembling liquid metal in color, and I realize that sounds crazy, but that's how it looked. It was completely silent, with no sound indicating that something was powering it. And it hung there long enough for Josh and me to exchange a brief "what the duck is that? Do you see that? What the hell is that?" back and forth exchange. And then it shot straight up into the sky, so ducking fast. Then it suddenly disappeared, as if it had been flying upward and was abruptly turned off. And everything returned to normal, or perhaps it had always been normal, but that orb was extraordinary. It wasn't like anything I've ever seen, and maybe that made everything ducking weird around it. I don't remember us being scared, just very in awe, but after about 2 days, we never talked about that shit again, not to each other. I know he told his BF and other friends, and I have too, but we talk about it with each other. It makes it a thing that really happened, not a hallucination or something explainable. Demon encounter last night. For the last few weeks since moving to a new place, I have experienced some unsettling events. The first night after moving in, I fell asleep and had some very intense lucid dreams. This is probably the 4th time I have had an actual lucid dream. However, I actually tend to get into lucid dreaming territory pretty often, maybe like 3 times a month, where I have some weird experiences, mostly feeling like I'm vibrating, hearing strong wind sounds, and occasionally feeling like I'm starting to float upwards. The thing is, these experiences are starting to happen multiple times a week, and they tend to have some dark presence feeling to them. For example, in one of my lucid dreams, I don't know how to describe it, but basically, I was hovering, and I saw some sort of very blurry figure, which I automatically sensed and somehow knew was a dark energy, but I was not scared of it. It was kind of freaky, not because of the figure. I actually felt no fear, but rather because I was confused as to why every time I focused on this, let's say, demon, I started to feel this great power and energy, and I'd start to float upwards. The thing that freaked me out was that I enjoyed it, but I knew whatever was making me feel so powerful was not good, and I remember thinking all I want is good energy and love. And basically, I felt a positive energy that made me feel powerful as well, yet it was nothing compared to what the bad energy/demon thing gave me when I focused on it. So yeah, inside my head I was confused and worried why I didn't feel so powerful or euphoric with the good energy. That was on the first night of me moving in, but that's not all. Since moving here, I've had multiple times where I get those feelings I mentioned above, such as starting to feel like floating and so on. However, last night I was sleeping, and I woke up in my room, but I wasn't actually awake. Anyway, in this state, I felt that presence again, so instead of ignoring it, I said, "Duck it," and decided to face this demon. So I asked it to come out, And it did. Bro, duck this life, this shit's not supposed to be real. It moved quickly towards me, and when I saw its face, it resembled the demon nun. Also, when I asked it to come out, that whooshing wind noise happened. I quickly closed my eyes and thought of God and Jesus so hopefully, it would go away. Strangely, it worked. I saw this calming face, which looked like Jesus, and it stopped, and I actually woke up. Okay, so I don't know what's happening to me and why I seem to attract all these spiritual experiences. If anyone knows anything about stuff like this, please let me know. Thanks. An unknown entity visits my boyfriend while he sleeps. My boyfriend and I are really freaked out about this and would like help from someone regarding what this entity could be and what we should do about it. So he and I fall asleep on FaceTime every night, and there have been 2 incidents, that I have been awake to see, at least, that have happened in the past 6 months, both at different households in different states. In June, we were on FaceTime as usual around 12 a.m. His phone had just fallen after he accidentally hit it while sleeping, and I was fully alert, watching videos. When out of nowhere I hear his door to his room open and a man with a very deep voice starts talking to him, and then I hear my boyfriend move and say something back. I couldn't hear exactly what they were saying since the phone was covered by the blanket when it fell and my phone quality sucks. I ask him about it the next morning, and he has no clue what I'm talking about or that his closet door was open when he closed it the night prior. His mom has a boyfriend in the house, however, he was at work, and also he and my boyfriend aren't very close, nor was it his voice, so it wouldn't be plausible that he came into his room at 12 a.m. Last night, the same incident occurred again. However, this was at his dad's house, which is at least 9 hours away from his mom's house. This time the phone did not fall, so I could see him sleeping still, and I heard his door slam open and some man with the same deep voice saying, "All right, come on, let's go." I don't see the person, but then I see my boyfriend waking up and begin to talk to him. Unfortunately, I hung up as soon as this happened since he was not supposed to be on his phone for reasons, and I didn't want him getting in trouble since I first thought it was his dad. I told him about it this morning, and he was just as confused as last time, and he asked his dad, who was most definitely asleep since he needs to get up extremely early for work, about it, and his dad denied ever coming into his room last night. We're both very freaked out, and if anyone has had a similar experience or knows who or what this is, please reach out. Thank you. I feel like I'm being watched every night. For the past year or so, I've had the terrible feeling of being watched or stood over while I sleep. To set this up, my bed is in the middle of my room against the back wall, and on one side is my side table and on the other a bookshelf. I can't remember exactly when it first happened, but it was early last year or late in 2023 that I woke up in the middle of the night to the feeling of someone standing right on the other side of me, as I sleep on my side. It was that prickly sense you get when you're standing in line and you know someone is behind you or looking at your back. It freaked me out. A couple nights later, the same thing. And then it started happening while I was awake in bed, but always on the same side of my room, in front of the bookshelf. I obviously told my parents, who thankfully comforted me, and for a while I started going to sleep with lights on like I was a kid afraid of the dark. It kind of stopped happening for a while, before one evening in about June or July last year. I was sitting at my desk on my iPad, on camera videoing something, with the camera facing me. I had the feature with the emotive reactions turned on, and then behind me came up the thumbs up reaction. I had a brief moment of silence, or fear, as anyone would, but then checked behind me, which of course is the bookshelf, and saw nothing, so I just thought my iPad was having a moment. Then the next night, I'm sitting at my desk again doing homework before I go on my phone to reply to a friend on Snapchat. I lift up the phone to send a picture with no filter on, and this filter appears twice. One on me, the other in the exact same spot as the thumbs up the previous night, and I'm telling you I was scared shitless. I bolted out of my room to tell my mom. My mom suggested putting sliced lime in my room, as it might ward off any negative energy. After we put the limes in, the feeling of being watched stopped completely. So I left these dried up lime halves in my room until about October/November. When I took them out, nothing happened until I came back from summer holidays in January this year. I started feeling paranoid, getting shivers every time I faced away from my bookshelf in my room. The feeling climaxed when I had an episode of sleep paralysis and woke up in the night, on my back, and felt a figure leaning over me. Since then, there's been the constant feeling of being watched from the corner in my room. I started getting so paranoid I was fearing sleep because I kept having horrible nightmares. This happened all term. When we just went away for the Easter holidays, I was relieved the entire week we were away, but the horrible feeling and waking up in the middle of the night have returned. What the hell do I do? I actually think it might be my brain manifesting my anxiety into a physical presence, or at least one mentally. It just creeps me out so much, especially with noises of cords moving beside my bed and a piece of paper I have clipped to the bookshelf moving. At least I can hear it moving, in the night. I saw a demon at church camp. I'm going to try to write about that time I saw a demon at church camp. I don't know that I feel all that safe even sharing this story. I don't think it's good to give attention to this kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe my story will help someone, so that's why I decided to finally share it. Short background: I was raised in a Christian home, but it was emotionally tiring. I have had other supernatural experiences, but nothing like this one. This still affects me to this day, in a PTSD way, where I feel physically unsafe even recalling what happened. It's extremely hard to find the words to describe what I saw. I'll do my best. As a kid, I went to church camp for a couple of days. There was a rumor that there was a ghost of an old woman. I knew this was fake because the camp was not that old, and the haunted cabin that was pointed out was where the camp counselors lived and had never been occupied by any old people, ever. Nevertheless, this rumor circulated because children often create stories for fun. I didn't believe it at all and didn't believe in ghosts. My older siblings were camp counselors there years later. I only told one of them what happened, and it was long after, and they never heard of any hauntings there. I still don't believe in ghosts, unless there is a possibility of some kind of time overlap that allows us to perceive a strange echo or something similar. I'm open to scientific possibilities and consider myself to be a very, very rational and logical person. I don't watch ghost hunting shows. I think mediums and stuff like that are either completely fake or dangerously dabbling in things they don't understand, and I want nothing to do with paranormal stuff. Back to the story. I know it was the night of one of my birthdays. I think it was my 11th or 12th birthday, but I can't be sure now. I went to that camp for a few years, but this was the last time I went. I refused to go back after this, so I know it was my last time there, and so I think I couldn't have been older than 12. We stayed in cabins of maybe 10 girls or so, plus a young adult camp counselor. I had a top bunk and was in a sleeping bag. The cabin was arranged in a small, square U shape, with bunks around the outside U and bunks around the inside U. My bunk was on the inside of the U, with a wall to my right and a very high, narrow window to my left. The window was high and narrow, situated above the tops of the other bunks. This is important later. It was winter in the mountains, so the cabin was heated but not especially warm. Nevertheless, I woke up in the middle of the night and sat straight up. I wasn't paralyzed at all. I was sweating buckets inside my sleeping bag. I've woken up in a sweat since then, but this was a lot of sweat. I felt so very, very hot, but I didn't move to get out of my sleeping bag because of what I saw slowly coming towards me. I looked towards the foot of the bunk bed, to the left foot corner, and that's where it was, but not right next to me. It was farther away, coming from a small hallway that I think led to the bathroom. I can see it in my mind, but I can't remember anymore where that hallway went. I'm pretty sure it was the bathroom. I couldn't look at anything but the thing there that was slowly moving towards me. Thinking about this part, I feel a fight or flight response really kick in, even now. Really, just the flight part. At that point, though, I felt confusion more than anything else. I was thinking that maybe it was an adult checking on us, because I couldn't really see much and it seemed shrouded in darkness, like a shadow coming out of the hallway. It was much darker than the dark hallway. The hallway was darker, but the window to my left was letting light inside. There was a tall outdoor light, and the light of that was streaming right inside that high, slim cabin window. What I noticed as the thing moved was that as it moved into where the light was streaming in, it was completely unaffected by the light. Then I really knew that it wasn't an adult checking on us. It was absolutely sickening to look at. It was like, ugh. I feel sick to my stomach even remembering this now. As a child, I thought to myself that it was what was left after taking a cookie cutter to something. It was a cookie cutter shape that moved, but it was as though someone took a cookie cutter and cut a shape from the universe. From our dimension. It was just so utterly wrong in its existence. My mind was telling me that a thing like this just couldn't exist. Shouldn't exist. When people talk about shadow people, I get it, but this wasn't a shadow. It was black, but it was the blackest black of nothing. Of emptiness. And it just sucked in the light rather than being affected by the light like a thing normally should. I don't have the words to describe what it looked like. I could say it was a black shadow, but that is so inadequate. It wasn't a shadow. It was empty, nothing moving, absence, wrong. I knew two things with perfect clarity in that moment. 1. I knew I was seeing a demon. It was trying to pretend to be an old woman. That was the cookie cutter shape that it managed. I feel sick even typing those words. I could feel how much it hated me. 2. I was utterly and completely safe from it. In that moment I knew with utter certainty without words, that God was with me, that God would not let it hurt me in any way. It was like being a small child and being in your dad's arms while he shows you a tiger behind glass at the zoo. Well, that pales in comparison, but it's the best I can come up with. There I was looking at the most terrifying thing, and I knew it hated me and that it was dangerous, but I knew I was completely safe. Then I fainted. I remember hearing my body hit the bunk bed. That's it. When I woke up the next morning, I wondered if anyone else had seen it. I was too afraid to tell anyone what I saw. I knew the adults would laugh and say I had a bad dream, or they would blame me for being such a bad person that I had to suffer through seeing a demon. Also, I just felt like when I thought about it, I couldn't find any words to talk about it. That was the last day at camp, so I didn't have to sleep in that bunk again. I wouldn't have. For a couple of years after, when I would recall the incident, the thing I would recall was God's comforting presence and the utter sense of safety that I felt. I refused to ever go back to that camp, though. As I grew older, around 13 or 14, the feeling of safety diminished, and I began to fully experience the horror of what had happened. Before that, I think God protected my brain. I wasn't afraid of seeing it again in my house. I knew instinctively that it couldn't come into my dad's house. I don't know why God allowed this thing to happen, but I have had other supernatural experiences, too, and I didn't want any of them to happen. Nothing in my dad's house, though. He protected us. I can write about those separately. Over the years I've asked myself many times if it could have just been sleep paralysis or a fever hallucination or something, but I am certain it wasn't. It's been a long time now, over 30 years, and it's the only thing in my life where I can still get these PTSD-type reactions even thinking about it. The complete wrongness of how it looked was nothing that I could have imagined at age 11. I've had tons of nightmares and bad dreams and even supernatural experiences, but nothing has ever been as absolutely awful as this was. And another bit of confirmation is that when my son was about 3 years old, he saw something similar, but he was too young to describe it well. My son just said it was a black shadow man who took my son's hat off my son's head, but I knew it was the same thing. The look on my son's face. Well, how dare it come into my house? I felt violated. I was spitting mad and told it in Jesus' name to leave and never come back, and it never did. It has never bothered my younger children. I sense that, across generations in both my husband's family and mine, these entities have thrived on perpetuating hurt within our families, as they seem reluctant to lose their toys over time. However, I have made every effort to break this cycle. I once met a pastor who shared that he had seen a demon with a typical appearance, and when he spoke about it, the look on his face and the hoarseness in his voice indicated to me that he had witnessed the same otherworldly it shouldn't exist phenomenon that I had experienced. I didn't tell him my story. I've heard other people say they saw stuff, but nobody rang true for me like that guy did. Well, and my son, I've only told my husband and one brother. Nobody else knows. I don't think either of them really believe me. I can't explain it in person like I can when written down, either, because it's just emotionally too hard to talk about without crying, which is completely embarrassing. I think it's too scary a thing for most people to believe. It's a lot easier to write things off by saying that it was a dream or something. Sometimes, I have wished I could convince myself that it was just a dream because it's absolutely horrifying to know that there are basically invisible, malevolent, ancient, and powerful entities around who would love to destroy you.